Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Ashland Planning Board meeting of Thursday, May 11th, 2023. We're calling the meeting to order at 7:18 p.m. First on our agenda this meeting, of course, as usual, is the clerk's report. Kate?
Since the last meeting, we have had one correspondence from a resident, which was on the 9 to 49 Homer Avenue project.
Thank you. Anything else that you want to? Okay. All right. The first large item on our agenda is a joint meeting with the Select Board for the Comprehensive Plan Committee appointments. Do you need to open your meeting?
Yes. So I'm going to call the Select Board meeting to order at 7:18. Because we have two members here on Zoom, I'll do like a roll call.
Mignani, aye.
Mitchell, aye.
Chair, aye.
And Kinsman, aye. So we have 4 out of 5 of us. Yolanda Greaves is not joining us this evening, so I think we are officially open.
So for this part of the meeting, I'm looking to turn it over to either someone on Planning Board who can explain what we're doing here, who is also on the Comprehensive Plan Management team, or someone besides me who knows what this is about.
Sure. Sure, I'll give it a shot. Hopefully the members have had a chance to review Peter's memo. Essentially, as you might recall, there was a joint document, Select Board and Planning Board approved process for the creation of the steering committee via some work by the project management team, so that certain town boards and committees would choose a representative, and then there would be 6 precincts representatives, as well as a high school rep. So at this point, what you received from Peter is a memo that combines all of those pieces together, so you can see whom did the local committees and boards pick. And as far as the 6 precincts, we had a very vigorous process by the project management team that involved posting, requesting interest. I think we got over 50 applications. And then we had a secondary process of asking folks to fill out, I believe, 5 questions. And that narrowed in to anywhere from 2 to over 8 applicants per precinct, at which point we had a scoring system by the project management team, where you would evaluate folks within each precinct. We averaged the scores, and the top 2 candidates, if there was only 2 applicants, or top 3 were chosen to interview. So out of that interview process, these were the consensus or voted upon individuals that were chosen by the project management team to present for recommendation to this team, to this joint meeting, including the high school rep. That's the summary. I don't know if Brandy or Kate, if you guys want to add or anything, or Pete, that I've missed.
No, I think that was the good synopsis. Just to give people that may not know who the project management team is, it's Anna and Kate, and myself and Yolanda Greaves from Select Board, and then Peter and Michael Herbert, our town manager. So the 6 of us went through this process. The only thing I would add is that we did have a huge group of folks that wanted to participate, which was surprising, but in a very good way. I do want to just thank everyone that had kind of gone with us through the process, because it was sort of an extensive process to narrow down that 56 applicants that had initially wanted to be a part of this. So just thank to everyone who wanted to participate. Also, just from an administrative standpoint, I just wanted to thank Susan Roby, who did all the administrative stuff and kept track of all of this stuff for us, which was great. And Michael, who did all the communications to all the applicants kind of along the way. So it was a really thorough process, and I think we had just a really great pool of candidates to be able to choose from. And so we wish we could have had a lot more, and we do want to include those folks that did apply. We want to continue to have them as part of this process. So.
And I should say that Brandy is going to propose to the steering committee next week, is the first meeting of the steering committee, a newsletter concept so that all of those 50 plus people that were interested can be engaged. And we're also going to present them with some ideas of how to formally engage the volunteers so that, for example, if you have 10 people from Precinct 2 who want to be part of the process, those could support whatever work that Precinct 2 rep is doing. So there's all kinds of ways to do that, and we are working to prepare an agenda and some documents for the steering committee meeting next week so that we can not lose such a deep interest.
Joe?
I just have one quick question with respect to my outside cop voice. With respect to the precinct reps, have you come up with an additional process? Should any of these reps have to, back off or resign from their positions because this scheduling and stuff is not conducive to their personal schedule? After they've gone through a couple of the months or whatever, and they realize, well, this is a lot of time and effort that I have to put into it. It may not be suited for me. So is there a way to vent?
I think that's a
other
really
reps?
good point, and I would suggest that we should add that to the next project management team meeting
Okay.
so that we can address that issue because we don't have a formal process.
Yeah.
And I think we've all thought about it and kind of thrown it out, but we haven't actually addressed a potential. We did communicate, I thought, pretty clearly during the interview process that the expectation was attendance once a month. It could be up to 2 years. There could be additional meetings. And a general expectation of over 80% attendance, I think at one point was expressed in one of the documents when we sought people. So hopefully that message was heard. But life happens, and we don't have a process for when someone on one of the precincts steps aside. So that's an excellent point and something that we will add to our discussion.
Are there any questions either from the planning board or from the select board regarding the process or how we got to the candidates?
I'm just gonna have some comments
Please.
when we go to actually voting on individuals. I'd like to discuss the first group especially, basically the first group.
So it sounded like maybe you guys had a process. I mean, this is a lot of names, so you had kind of a process by which we'll approach this evening. I think at the end we're looking for, is it a simple majority for the candidates to be approved? Is that?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
So I think the thought is that, and, if anyone has anything, any other thoughts, I thought we would just, if anyone had any questions about the candidates, the process, anything, we would discuss it and then basically read all the names and appoint as a group. So we're not going to individually vote on every single candidate. There's 29 people, so we do have quite
And just
a
to
bit.
clarify, the project management group did not vote on the first set, on the committee reps.
Yep.
We
that
only
was- yeah.
we only took a vote or reached consensus on the precinct and the high school rep. We did not interview any of the board and committee individuals. That was just kind of done by them. I did have a quick question on myself, simply because I recall prior discussion that the committees and boards would appoint a member, and I wasn't sure if Mike Sierra is a school committee member or not. So I wanted to clear that up. I don't know, Peter, if you have an answer to that.
So I can respond to that. So it's Dr. Michael Kyra is part of the administrative team in the school department. The school committee, we had said that our meetings were going to be the third Thursday of every month, and we had set that date. Those are also the dates that the school committee meets, so the school committee couldn't send a member of the school committee to be a part of this. Michael Kyra is a resident and a member of the school department, so it's in lieu of a member of the school committee.
So he'll report back to the school committee.
Yeah.
So I think because I think prior discussions of our two groups, select board and planning board, was that these would be members. We just need to make sure when we're voting that we understand that slight change in the process.
Sure.
Yeah, that was my question as well about, because I was kind of, Michael's a great guy, but I was surprised to see him there rather than any of the members of the school committee. So Brandy, you're saying basically you guys, the meetings will be scheduled the same time that they meet? I thought they met on Wednesdays.
No, they now meet on Thursdays.
Oh,
Yeah, they meet opposite planning board. I would know it well in my house.
so they moved it Thursday, okay,
So-
all right.
So that was a concern by the school committee that they would have to miss a member of their own committee and their own twice-a-month meetings by sending someone once a month to this meeting. So I think this is the solution they landed on. So,
Okay, I'll reluctantly comply with that, go along with that.
okay. So I think also, was there a suggested, I mean, you talked about reading names, was there a suggested format of reading some of the names and voting and then going on, if there were, in a similar manner to budget and town meeting, like we read a certain number of names, is there any questions? No, we'll vote that group.
That's the fastest and economical way of doing it, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay. I read it somewhere.
Sure. Do you want to read?
Might have
Do
been
you want me to make a motion first, or how do you want to go about that?
a motion for,
I will, you know what, I'll read the names, and then we
Okay.
can make a motion to
Okay.
promote to the committee.
Yep.
that sounds good.
There are a couple names that may need your help on, Brandy.
Okay.
All right, thank you, please. So with that said, the comprehensive plan was designed, excuse me, I was gonna read the paragraph from my memo. It says, "The comprehensive plan committee was designed to have representation from the existing town boards and committees in order to bring together different perspectives for the benefit of the plan. Listed below are the volunteer members from each board and committee that have been selected by their their respective peers to serve on the comprehensive plan committee. From the library trustees representative is, Claire Gross. Gross, excuse me. The pressure. The Open Space and Recreation, Roberta Sulman. Sustainability Committee, Chuck Litz. Affordable Housing Trust, Alan Galawango. Thank you. Board of Health, Ed Berman. Cultural Council, Stacy Grant Lewis. DEI Task Force Representative,
Moala Kitinyamba.
okay.
Kitinyambwa.
The group apologizes for the pronunciation of the name.
I'm sorry, Moala.
So,
Yeah.
so why don't we pause there? Anna, do you want to make your motion?
I will make a motion to appoint the representatives stated so far
And
to the steering committee for the
Second.
comprehensive plan.
And Kate is seconding, so we will have a roll call vote first at the planning board, and then I'll give it to select board.
Sure.
Roll call vote. Oh, actually, the motion has been made. Are there any questions on those names? On the names read so far? Any questions on those names? Okay. Seeing none, we will vote on the motion.
Deepa Venkatai.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Arona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
And Tricia Kendall, aye.
And for the select board, Steve and Rob, can you, because you guys are on
Chair,
Zoom.
aye.
Mitchell, I.
And Kinsman, aye.
So that passes 9-9. Peter, you're on.
Next up, group number 2, the Historical Commission, Karen Coleman. The Upper Charles Trail Committee, Tony Lewis. The Conservation Commission, Carl Hackinson. The Council on Aging, Steve Mitchell. Design Review Committee, William Novakowski. The Economic Development Advisory Committee, Beth Reynolds.
Anna?
Okay, and I will make a motion to appoint to the steering committee for the comprehensive plan the names just read.
I second.
All right. Are there any questions on this group of names? All right. No one wants to protest Steve Mitchell? All right.
I will. I protest.
All right, seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Deepa Venkatai.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
Tricia Kendall, aye.
And for the select board,
Rob
you want-
Shear, aye.
Mitchell, I.
and Kinsman, aye.
All right, that passes 9-9.
For the third group, the Town Forest Committee puts forth Kara Hume. The Zoning Board of Appeals representative, Mr. Nathan Band. The School Committee, who meets on the third Thursday of each month, has selected Dr. Michael Kyra, a employee of the Ashland School System and also a resident of the town of Ashland, to represent the school committee on the comprehensive plan. Mr. Kyra will also be responsible to inform the school committee of all events and happenings and updates regarding the master plan. Moving on to precinct, no, just.
Yeah, why don't we,
Okay.
since they're one group?
Do you want to ask questions first?
Oh, we made the motion first.
And I'll make a motion to approve the 3 board representatives as stated by Peter.
Second.
And any questions on that group of 3? All right, seeing none, roll call vote.
Deepa Venkatai.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
Tricia Kendall, aye.
And for the select board,
Rob Shear, aye.
Steve Mitchell, I.
Kinsman, aye.
All right, again, that's 9-9. And now we're going on to the precinct representatives. So I just wanted to say I read through all the information that Peter provided for the different candidates, and it was really great to hear, great to read everyone's enthusiasm and varying backgrounds, varying amounts of time in Ashland, from 15 or more years to, hey, I just moved here. You know, and so I thought that was a great amount of variety. So I just want to congratulate the management team for, I think, putting forth a really mixed, diverse group, I thought, from what I could read. So are there any other comments before I have Peter kind of officially read the names?
Sure. Yeah, I would agree with you completely, Tricia. I think, kudos to the management team for vetting these folks, and I agree as well. The seeing some really new residents willing to jump in and participate on that is really, I think, very encouraging.
Yes, definitely.
If I could just add, yeah, I certainly appreciate the effort that went into this, and I know it looks like a good group, and but I'm glad to hear that you have plans to keep other people involved. I had some folks I encouraged to get involved in this who didn't get named, but I know they're very skilled and could be a great addition to this. So I'm glad to hear you're planning to keep people involved and ready to move forward. And thanks for all this detailed work.
I mean, I'll add, I think we were really challenged because there was so much excellence in the applicant pool. So it was a lot of really, really tough decisions to choose this particular talented group, and it doesn't discount the superb talent of everyone who was not chosen. So I think it's really important to recognize the efforts of everyone who applied, and it was not an easy process to apply because we asked a lot of tough questions. So we will absolutely find a way to keep them engaged.
Well, the newsletter, I think, is a great idea.
I did too. All right. Peter, on that note, I think we are back to you, and I think you can read all of these as one group, and then we'll ask for any questions or comments if there are any.
Okay, without further ado, Precinct 1, Courtney Wooten.
Roten.
Okay. I'm going to have trouble on these, excuse me. Precinct 2, Leah Suarez. Precinct 3, David Avancho. Avancho.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Avancho.
that's okay.
Okay. Precinct 4, Arun Manoharan.
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 This is fun to watch Peter do this.
We might need you again, Deepa.
I'll pay to watch
swearing,
this.
yeah. Precinct 5, Rajastri Ghosh.
Deepa?
Could I nominate anyone
second that.
besides Peter to read the list?
Precinct 6, Lisa Churchill. Got that one. High school representative, Hassan
Hassini.
Reddy.
All right.
You got this, Peter. I will make a motion to approve the precinct and high school reps as Peter read and as Deepa assisted.
A second.
All right, there's been a second. Are there any questions or comments on the group of precinct and high school representatives? All right, seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Planning Board?
Deepa Venkata.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
And Tricia Kendall, aye.
Hold on. And for the select board?
Sure, I.
Mitchell, I.
And Kinsman, aye.
All right, and that passes 9-9. It sounds like we have a steering committee.
Not yet. We have one more group.
Oh, that's right.
So-
one more group. This won't be
So
controversial.
Pete says, "You want to do these?" I think he's done reading names. Although this is an easy group. So as part of this, the project management team is becoming part of the steering committee. So formally, we have to nominate the group from the project management team to the steering committee as well. So I will read the names of the folks from the project management team. Anna Tesmanitsky, Catherine Jersik, Yolanda Greaves, Brandy Kinsman, Peter Matchek, and Michael Herbert.
Second.
I think someone
don't-
should make a motion
Yes.
other
Is
than
that-
other than us.
Yeah.
I'll
Oh,
make a motion to promote the project management group to the steering committee.
thank you. And there was
Second.
seconded.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Any questions or comments on this group? All right. Seeing none, roll call vote for the planning board.
Deepa Venkata.
I think I vote Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
And Tricia Kendall, aye.
And for the select board?
Sure, I.
Mitchell, I.
And Kinsman, aye.
All right.
We have a steering committee.
Now we have a steering committee. All right.
All right.
Yeah, right.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Oh,
Steve, I
sure.
think that was maybe your last official vote.
No, actually, Rob, you and I have a subcommittee meeting tomorrow.
Oh, I was
Oh,
trying to
okay.
forget that, but that's not an
voting.
official vote.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Okay. For Yolanda. Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It was a block.
Yeah.
It was a block. It's okay.
Okay.
I think it's okay.
All right. So is there any other, have we taken care of all that business?
The only thing that we do need to talk about is,
Right.
So at our last project management team meeting, we had agreed to move forward two consultants for the, that we had received RFPs on, that we wanted to interview and consider for the comprehensive plan process. And so we need to do a joint, as we had kind of agreed on, we were going to do joint interviews, so we need to set a date for that, that meeting as well. And so the latest that I had seen was that we were trying to scramble to get a date that might work.
Yeah, you had, I think, put out the date of May 31st, which I passed on to the planning board, but it sounds like, unless something has changed, that one of the consultants said that they cannot make that date, so we may be waiting to see, unless you have another date?
We have a date,
Okay.
and so it's just seeing what scheduling looks like for the two boards. For, I think it's Tuesday, June 13th, which obviously is not ideal, but we're looking for like a 2-hour time block for us to interview both.
And just to clarify, there were 3 applicants, and then we narrowed in on the top 2, because when we did the scoring system within the project management team, there appeared to be strong consensus for the top 2. And then the way the 2-hour meeting would go, if I recall, would be presentations from each group, question session from joint committees, and then actual discussion and vote that night, hence the 2 hours. I mean, we can certainly try to go under 2 hours, but 2 hours seemed reasonable in light of the fact that we're interviewing teams, and we're going to have questions and need.
And what time is that meeting?
I think we were trying to shoot for 6 o'clock.
I have a conflict, but
Okay,
I'll be there late.
okay.
I have a general question. Just due to my professional work, I do have active engagement and contractual engagement with one of the firms, with other section of one of the firms that's participating. Do I have to abstain? from
If they're
participating?
one of the two that we're interviewing. So it's possible that the one you work with is not one of the three. So maybe connect with
Well,
Peter.
I saw the RFPs, that they were one of those RFPs.
But if we're not interviewing them,
Okay,
then,
all right.
But if there is the interview, then he's gonna have to recuse himself.
that's what it sounds like.
And I have a conflict that night, so.
So that puts at least the planning board down to 3. I don't know if Kevin is able to fill in on that kind of circumstance.
Do,
All the meetings he should be able to.
do we know who the two applicants are so that we can determine?
Goldstein and
Goldson.
Goldstein, excuse me, in VHB.
Yeah, I work with VHB
Got it.
in several projects, yeah.
Okay, so then you cannot,
You're gonna have to, the cleanest thing to do is just
To recuse.
recuse,
Okay, I will.
and then go from there.
and so that brings us to 3.
So,
And I don't know about Yolanda.
Sounds like we need other dates.
Yeah,
yeah, why don't we see if there's other dates that
Okay.
fit more easily? And then, yeah, obviously
we'll
you're
do
trying
some
to,
communication.
obviously you're trying to get this going as soon as possible, but.
Could you do it like on Thursday? Where you have
That's what I was going to say. What if we take, I mean, it's up to the chair, obviously, but what if we take a planning board meeting, an actual planning board meeting, and utilize that? Because I feel like we've gotten more efficient in our meetings.
We
And-
have, but how far out, well, if that's it could be a good date for us, it might not be a good date for others, but we probably do also have public hearings scheduled. I think we have some at our next meeting, some things that are opening up.
So we have two new things happening on the 25th of May, so we would have to continue to look into June. Our two meetings, our first meeting in June is the 8th, and obviously whatever we continue from tonight, and obviously on the 25th, we would have to push around a little bit. But also, we have the ability to, start at 6:30 or something.
Well, that's what I was
like
going
that,
to say.
which is
Our
great.
normal
Yeah.
meetings start at 7:15. If we start at 6 and do the interviews, I'm just saying I would be willing to have a longer planning board meeting to make this happen
And do
for
it all
the
in one night.
applicants and do it
Yeah.
all in one night.
Would that
Me
work
personally.
for, would June
June 8th.
8th?
That would work for you. Rob, does June 8th work for you?
Yeah, I think it does.
Okay.
Because if we go 6 to 8, we still have room for our regular business. It's going to be a long meeting,
Hold the other
but then
date
we're,
as well. Should we
Kate
hold
Deepa,
both
I think, are
dates?
coming back from the city often. Is that a day that you can get back early, or? Yeah,
I was just gonna block my tickets to Chicago, but maybe that has to be Friday morning now.
oh, okay.
okay.
Make it work.
But, yeah, I mean, I think if we can make it work for the consultant, or
I mean,
both
the-
consultants.
I'm just throwing that
and
out there.
No, I think it's a
and
good
just
idea.
get that done.
It's a
I mean,
good idea.
the other option is May, when are we meeting? May, the next meet,
Sounds like that's full.
May 25th, and start early and push the other things to later and just not book up that day.
How about I can work with Susan, Roby, and Michael, and obviously we'll be together tomorrow, so the three of us can talk it over and reach out.
Okay.
to
And I think Jen will
consultants.
need to be involved in it,
Jen will be
too.
involved as well.
Does
so-
May 25th work for the rest of the planning board to start earlier? Our normal meeting?
So it would be a normal planning board meeting, but maybe start a little earlier. And we would just keep the rest of that schedule light. There's a few things on there already, but they're kind of just their intro stuff or smaller things, I think.
Yeah, it's intro
That
stuff.
seems like
Yeah.
a good one.
Okay. Possible?
All right, so we're holding these 3 dates for now, is that?
dates.
Just the 2 dates. So right now, May 25th and June 8th.
Yeah.
Okay.
Both are
Okay.
Thursdays.
And probably,
6:30 or 6?
I think if 6:30 works better for people coming from Boston, I think we can do 6:30.
Yeah.
6:30.
Okay. So you'll kind of coordinate to see if
Oh,
that
yeah,
might
I'll work with
Okay.
Michael tomorrow. I see Michael's in the meeting, and obviously I'll reach out to him and Susan Roby tomorrow, so we can try to
Okay.
figure something out together.
So, and it sounds like the preference may be for May 25th? Because otherwise
For
Deepa may be
Deepa's
traveling.
calendar, yeah.
So
Okay.
since Michael is on, do we want to ask him if, like, I don't know, because they've been in contact with the consultants?
Yeah, if he has any, he's writing a glare for me. Michael, do you know anything else about the consultants and their schedules as far as a meeting date?
So they have offered, excuse me just one minute, let me go back to my email. They had offered, I believe, June the 13th.
That's a no-go, Michael.
Okay. Excuse me.
June 13th.
They cannot do May 31st.
June 13th, Tuesday. I thought that's the date that you cannot. So it sounds like we're down to June 8th or May 25th as 2 new dates for consideration.
I could certainly propose that to them. I heard Pete, we'll obviously talk tomorrow and we'll present those dates to them.
Okay. Well, we won't spend any more time on it this
Yeah.
evening, then get some more information. We'll see when we can get them in here,
Okay,
so.
sounds good. All right.
And it sounds
All
like
right.
I think we're
Marcelo
good.
would not need
So-
to be there early, right? Because he's, yeah,
Right.
okay.
You can just tell me what time that business is
show
gonna
up.
be closed, and then I can join after
Right.
that.
So we'll go ahead and adjourn our meeting and then leave you guys to your business for tonight. So
All right, sounds good.
Can I get a motion to adjourn the select board meeting? So moved. And a second? Okay.
Second.
Roll call vote?
Sure, aye.
Mitchell, I.
Kinsman, aye. We are adjourned at 7:50. All right. Thank
You're
All
you.
right,
last
thank you, Select Board. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Good
Thanks.
night. Good night.
Have a good night.
Night.
You too.
You too.
What's going on? What am I missing? Oh, my apologies.
Anna,
Uh, 9 to 49 Homer Ave. I feel like my mic just is kind of up and down. Site plan and special permit application. This was continued from April 27th. And I think at our last meeting, we had asked, is a copy of that in here,
The memo is not in their
Okay.
packet, so I apologize.
okay.
If it was not printed out.
I just didn't know if there might be things on that list that. So there was a memo that was distributed to the board and also, I believe, and also to the applicant regarding the various items that we had questions about. Most of those are reviewed and spelled out on,
I can share my screen and put it up here.
yeah, on the document that is from the law office of Terrence Morris. So he went through those went through that list and commented on the things that we wanted a bit more information on. I think the only thing, actually, I'm not sure, it'd be good to look at the list. I think the only thing that we added to this list that isn't on here yet is the sustainability checklist, or not
I'm gonna print
checklist,
that. Oh,
best
yeah.
practices.
Luckily, in town hall, I have a printer.
Oh, did you get that
So I'm
list?
sent-
Okay, great.
It just got sent to the printer, so.
Yeah, so that's kind of the, the first objective for tonight, obviously, is to go through that list and our understanding of those different considerations. So I will turn the floor, unless you have a summary, Peter, I will turn the floor over to Mr. Morris.
Nope, I'm all set.
All yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Terry Morris. I'm an attorney with offices at 57 Elm Road in Newton, and I'm here representing WJK Homer LLC, the petitioners in this matter. If I understand what Mr. Matchak had to say, is that you do or not have a copy of my responses?
We have a copy of your responses. We were looking for the memo listing those topics that we had
I
sent
see.
to
Yeah,
you.
well, you know what?
Yeah. So that's what he's
Then I
printing
can-
out.
I think he can put the memo up, and then I can present them basically for the public.
I think he already sent it to the printer, but,
Okay,
yeah, he can put up whichever document,
the other document. this
yeah,
one.
that you would like to put up. Yep,
Yeah, okay.
as soon as he
So-
returns.
Do you want me to go through our responses, or because it's a public hearing, or do you want to simply have me answer any questions you may have?
I think we probably should go through the responses. I don't
Okay,
think it
then
needs
I'd
to be
like
read
to-
word for word, or, you know.
Yeah, I'd like to present them, even though it may be, as I say, certain members of the public who may not have access to these, so. The first question was, provide an overview of all relief waivers sought related to the application for the special permit and site plan approval. Our response was as follows. The mixed residential and commercial project, which is an allowed use in the Ashland Downtown District, is compliant with all the dimensional controls set forth in the zoning bylaw for that use. In our initial application, we were advised to include special permit relief because a portion of the roofs were flat. Ostensibly, a flat roof requires a special permit. We did so that the application would not be deemed deficient in any respect. However, it is generally acknowledged that that particular building design standard in the bylaw was meant to discourage flat roof buildings and the visual presentation of such buildings on the streetscape. I think it's that objective of the ordinance that is governing our response. There are two reasons why we would suggest that special permit relief is not necessary for the flat roof elements on our building. The first is that because that provision in the ordinance was intended to deal with flat roofs as the main component of the building structure, as illustrated in the bylaw, where you have pictures of the various building types showing fully flat roof buildings, mansard style buildings, and pitched roof buildings. The flat roof components comprise only 17% of the total roof structure on this project. And that roof structure is meant to actually be used constructively for the placement of the HVAC equipment, so it is out of sight and not visual from the street. In this case, the flat roof components comprise 17%, as I said. But secondly, neither of those sections are visible from the street, but rather they are embedded in the interior of the roof line. The second question you asked was to provide a summary of the residential unit count and the commercial space square footage. Include a parking count in relation to the Ad C zoning district and the dimensional size of all proposed spaces. Our response was, the project contains 29 residential units requiring 58 spaces or 2 spaces per dwelling unit. There is in the project 8,550 square feet of commercial space that require 48 spaces based upon the computation of 180 square feet per space. All of these spaces are now compliant at 9 by 20. I recognize that in earlier versions of the architectural plan set, it was noted that some of those spaces were going to be compact. However, your bylaw, unfortunately, does not provide for compact spaces. It is silent on that matter. And so what we did was we reconfigured the parking spaces, and we had initially had an excess number of parking spaces. So in this case, we were able to accommodate making all the spaces now 9 by 20, including those previously proposed as compact. But in conversation with the planning director about this issue, about the size of compliant spaces, it was noted that, in fact, although the bylaw does say 9 by 20 is the requirement, and it's actually contained in the definition of a parking space, that there have been projects, either in the past or presently in the queue, projects larger than ours or that may have been approved in the past, that have spaces that some of which were 9 by 18. And I don't know whether that was done with specific relief or whether it was simply approved as was presented. The total number of spaces required as a result of the computations I just gave you relative to commercial requirements and residential is 106. However, because in section 8.513, it states where there's a mixture of land uses on one lot, the number of parking spaces shall be only 75% of those stipulated above. That is, where there's a mixture of land uses, which we have, a mixed use, the parking requirements will be 56.25%, as is calculated 75% times 75%. Under that provision, we are required to and have provided on our plan 60 parking spaces.
Yeah, so I think what the bylaw says is that in the ADD district, the amount of parking goes down to 75%, and then if it's a mixed use, it goes down to 75% of that, which gets you to the 56 point whatever percent. So I think all of the language isn't there, so it's just clarifying.
The second asked us to look at the loading requirements and provide information on delivery traffic on site, such as UPS and Amazon, tenant move-in and move-out, and possible commercial delivery needs. The ground floor, the unit, let me respond. No, I'm sorry. The bullet point before that actually was in reference to the proposed ground floor residential unit fronting on Alden Street, review the ad districts, because ground floor buildings which front on streets shall be reserved for non-residential uses. Our response to that is that the unit on Alden Street, sometimes shown as residential, is actually commercial, containing 800 square feet, which has been included in the commercial total of 8,550, which I presented to you previously. It has always been identified as commercial on the civil site plan. However, at various times, it has been shown as residential on the architectural plan set due to an earlier approach that the development team had that would have treated the space as so-called swing space. It is now uniformly shown as commercial on both the architectural and civil plan sets. The next bullet point was regarding loading requirements, again, on delivery and move-in and move-out and partial commercial delivery needs. As previously noted, we have provided 2 pickup and drop-off areas created on the west side of the main entrance drive. Those spaces are immediately opposite a door with direct access into the residential lobby. This will provide sufficient access for both delivery and loading. The next issue was, the next bullet point, provide information regarding the interior trash, recycling room, required building codes, and pickup pattern truck size. Separate trash and recycling rooms are shown for commercial and residential uses on our architectural plan set. The trash is to be stored in roll-off containers that will be handled by employees of the management company for the building. Keep in mind that these are meant to be residential units and will be managed as such. Trash will be transported from the interior of the building to waiting vehicles on the entrance drive, and those trash pickups will be accomplished during such hours that it will not impede interior traffic flow to and from the building. And the trash and recycling both will be scheduled for pickup twice weekly. That twice weekly pickup is meant to basically mean that there will be no question of whether there's excess trash stored on site at any time. And as a result, we are able to use a trash pickup truck that is sufficiently smaller than the conventional pickup trucks that are used by Waste Management and other municipal pickup contractors. We will provide you with a truck profile. At the time I presented this, we didn't have that. We will provide that. The second bullet, next to last bullet point, please provide information on affordable units. As we had said at the outset, in our presentation, the very first presentation we made, we will be providing 3 two-bedroom units, which accounts for 10% of the affordable rentals at 80% of AMI. These units will be of comparable size and finishes as the market rentals and located throughout the building so as to not be sequestered. And lastly, you asked us about the ability to continue the downtown improvements upon the length of the site, sidewalk and underground utilities. The team is in the process of gathering information about the cost of doing so. We are familiar with the requirements to have utilities underground from the street onto the site, and we'll be providing connection in that manner. However, it should be noted that going into the public way and dealing with one or more of the utilities licensed by the Commonwealth about extending underground utilities is an extraordinary and costly request. We will be providing new sidewalks because obviously right now the site presents one continuous open curb cut. So that's without question, and that is shown on our civil plans, a new concrete sidewalk. The problem that we have in dealing with, and we're actually trying to acquire costs to do so, but instinctively it tells us that a project of this size is not sufficient to sustain that kind of expense. It is more appropriate for the larger projects that I think are before you. I think you have one on the agenda after us for 188 to 200 units. Those kind of projects have the kind of margin that would allow them to do so. But our instinctive reaction is this project cannot bear such a cost, but we wouldn't ask you to accept that until we're able to present you with some figures. So that presents our formal response to your request. We hope you will find them responsive, and I'm here to answer any questions. Thank you. Excuse me.
Just to note, the one of the things which I mentioned earlier, which I think maybe was sent later than the list, is that, but I think it was sent, right? The sustainability best practices.
If you do, can you bring that up on the screen?
This is a list that we put together in conjunction with the Design Review Committee and with the Sustainability Committee just fairly recently.
I can respond to that. If it's on the screen, I can respond to
Well,
that.
it's a long list. It's
I know.
Okay, well, I don't think we're going to go through any of the things.
Okay, if you don't want to, that's fine.
So you've had the list and you've gone through it?
I've had the list, gone through it. It took me a while because I had to consult with our subcontractors about various elements.
Okay.
So I can certainly give you an overview on each and every point. And
I think that'd be a good thing to have an overview,
Sure.
but not some of these things
Not in
get really
detail, right.
some of these things get really specific, and we
go
want
yes, no.
yeah. I think it's about hitting some of the big ones, especially ones that the board maybe has questions about.
Peter, can you want me to do that? Yeah.
Madam Chair, I have a question while Peter.
Please,
but,
yep.
Just on your last note, I personally find all these answers reasonable. I don't have a problem with any of them. On the last one, though, I think that you mentioned that the project was going to put a concrete sidewalk anyways.
Yes, we are.
But, so we've spoken about two separate things in all the meetings. One was the hardscape of the configuration of that hardscape.
Yeah.
And then we talked about the utilities, which you referred to, and we'll talk about that when you get your summary. But from the beginning, I think what we have asked is that the materiality and the design of that sidewalk would match what the town has been doing.
That's correct, and it will.
But it's not only concrete, so I just want to.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, I didn't
Okay.
mean that to be all-inclusive.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're still on the same page.
Yes, we are, and I'll just recall that the architect and I did a site walk, walking through one end of Main Street down to the site.
Yeah.
And we noted the changes, and we are committed to carrying that
Okay.
look.
Thank
Sorry if I misled you by talking about all concrete.
Other questions from the board while Peter's bringing this up?
I mean, this might be more for the board than the applicant, but so this site is unique of having two front streets, Homer and Alden. So if the front unit on Alden Commercial, you still have those others, I think, have to be considered, right? Are those acceptable to our definition of the bylaw?
Are you talking about the two units behind the front unit?
Yeah.
They don't face the street.
Okay.
Yeah, we can look up the exact bylaw. I have read it today, but I can't, and I think I have an old copy, so we'd need, do you have your bylaw book?
Oh, boy.
But there's also discretion in there, obviously, on the third point, that lets the planning board make that determination, which I guess is, I can look, it's, what, 8.5 point
I think I might be able to read it from here rather than there. Unless they're blown up. Peter, can you blow those up?
Oh, you can read it from wherever's comfortable for you. You don't have to look at.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm always looking for my glasses, too.
Okay, vegetation and landscaping. Minimal site disturbance to protect and preserve the natural landscape and habitats. For those members, the chair and members who basically did the walk with us, we can see that there's not much of that on the site. It is largely heavily.
Yeah, so again, we don't want to go through these point by
Yeah,
points.
okay.
We kind of want to just say that.
So
our-
that's, yeah, we can say that because there's not much to protect. Invasive species, yes. We will, we will remove them, such as we find them. Mature trees are protected and preserved. There's only one tree that we've been talking about. We will preserve that.
Yeah, I just don't want to use, please disagree with me, but I don't think we need to go through these point by point for these small things.
Okay, which one, why don't you pick out stuff and I can respond?
I mean, do you guys, I think a lot of these the design review committee will go through, I mean, whether there's 70%.
I mean, my suggestion would be, because at some point, the applicant will go to design review,
Mhm.
we could ask the applicant in design review to provide a response rather than spending time detail by detail today. It sounds like there's some kind of agreement to utilize it as a guide and do the best that you can.
Oh, absolutely.
But I don't think we need to do that today if we're going to go to design review at some point, and design review could report to us.
That's right.
I think one of the biggest points is this would be a fossil-free building.
That's what I'm wanting to hear.
And that's why I wanted the opportunity to state that.
Okay.
I think I may have stated that in passing during the presentation, but given the fact that we're focused on these sustainability things, it's important to repeat that.
Okay. Yeah, to me, I mean, we can scroll up a little bit. I think to me, a lot of these things are going to be really looked at carefully by design review, and the people that are on that committee.
There'll be no potable water used for landscaping either.
But things that are having energy use, obviously, those may not fall specifically under that kind of design. So I wanted to make sure we address it here. If you can just scroll up so that we can see the different categories in case something rings a bell. Yeah, so there's the energy use.
Fossil fuel, all those. The other thing, or the other very important thing is, all of the parking spaces will be wired for EV, with 20% of those will have chargers.
Okay,
So
which
there'll be
is
6 chargers servicing 12 spaces, which is 20% of the total.
which is current stretch code or
It's on the.
yeah.
It's on there.
It is on there. So what I'm trying to remember is because the stretch code is changing. The new building code stretch code is, the residential low rise has changed in January and the new one is coming up in July, but I think we have that covered with these. So, but that'll be under the building permit anyway. So if those numbers go up, it's the building permit, not,
We
yeah.
understand.
yeah.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, there it is, 20% EV station, yep. We're good with all of that EV stuff. Site lighting the same. We're low profile, yes. We will have site lighting that is dark sky, water and waste, trash and recycling, low flow toilets, yes. I can't comment on the last one about lead and passive house. The architect's not here, and I would feel speaking out of my comfort zone about that.
Yeah, it's mostly, information gathering for us, like what you might be looking at that isn't on that list.
Yeah.
So, does anyone have any specific questions? Everyone knows that list is very detailed. I'm happy to give it into the hands of the design review committee to look at it more precisely, but if anyone has questions here, obviously you're very free to ask them. So,
I don't have questions about that document,
Okay.
but I do think that it makes sense for the architect and design review to dig deeper into it rather than the attorney to.
Yeah, I had intended to have the answers to those in the next day or two, because I finally was able to talk to all the consultants who would be involved. So if you are referring us to design review, we will be,
When we do, I think this would be the right thing to explore
that will be
further
the
with
document.
them.
We will have that submitted by the end, well, tomorrow's Friday, I could submit it tomorrow.
okay, so I just wanted to return to the question, unless yours is related, Marcelo, about Kate's, about the units behind, Peter.
No, my question is different, so why don't you go over that?
Okay, so this is about the dwelling unit behind the commercial unit. So dwelling units, ground floor buildings which front on streets shall be reserved for non-residential uses except as specified below. Dwelling units shall be allowed on ground floors of buildings only where, 1, the building is set behind another building which has non-residential uses on the ground floor. 2, the residential portion of the first floor of a building is set behind street front non-residential uses within the same building. And 3, in other cases where the special permit granting authority feels that street front residential uses would not have an adverse impact on the community of the non-residential street front uses.
So I think, Madam Chair, the next to last one covers our situation.
Yeah, I mean, does the planning board have any comments on that?
It seems compliant with the next to last one of those bullet points.
Remember, we did that because we wanted to provide a transition.
Seems, right?
And that's where we have the largest open space on the site. Those units open onto that. So there was a lot of thought involved in that design.
Yeah, are there any other comments from the board?
Just one, and I'm just thinking on that discussion now, which we will have relative to the infrastructure and the idea of kind of completing the downtown kind of project up to the corner. While the review with the design committee takes place, are there any resources in the town? We've talked about for other purposes that there's sometimes allocations in the town for some specific purposes. These being a town project, are there any resources that conversation could reach to?
Could help to get the utilities
help achieve
underground.
it? I think if we can frame the downtown as best we can, this town will be grateful for it. So if there are resources that the town can offer, I would encourage everybody to try to reach.
I kind of had 2 points similar to that, which I think in addition to the utilities piece and town resources, I did finally walk the site yesterday with the assistant planner, and it really helped kind of see how this site relates to the rest of downtown. And I thought a little bit more deeply about the future, right? Like 5-10 years ahead, and how would I as a resident utilize that space? And one of the things I found really helpful being on site is when I kind of walked with the plans, and I realized that the commercial spaces right on Homer, if you're kind of sitting there outside at this commercial space and you're looking across, you can see the old train station, and across you can see Erica's and the farmer's market, right? And I sort of imagine myself on a Saturday morning sitting there having a cup of coffee, and what would this look like, and how would it feel, and what would I as a resident do there, whether I live there or visited somebody in the area. And I have to confess, I had this urge to walk across the street to the farmer's market, and I imagine myself not really wanting to go all the way left and take a big U-turn, and I sort of visualized a much more lively energy right there with the old train station, with the farmer's market, with Erica's. It's almost like you could create a real energy there, kind of crossing. And obviously, we as a community don't have it right now, and I would not put that pressure on the developer, but it got me thinking kind of wider. How are we thinking about the downtown, right? And presumably, we're gonna have some development at Main Street that could be congruent or connected to this, and how would we visualize this space being used? And if the utilities are too expensive and we're gonna start thinking about town resources, maybe the town resource piece could explore some of those things as well. Do we want a crosswalk there? Do we maybe want a pedestrian overpass towards the Erica side? Do we want, and those things, again, it's not up to the developer, it's up to us to think about. But if we're gonna go to the town or to the MBTA folks with the state and say, hey, is there some MBTA related funding? Is there something to put these utilities under? We might as well explore a wider conversation with the state as to what can we do to make the downtown revitalized in connection to this project. I am curious though, whether this applicant would consider an additional crosswalk towards what is now your property, which is the old train station. And then I'm going to throw this out there, whether the applicant would consider giving the town some access, almost like an easement, to utilizing part of the old train station in the future.
So.
For example, as you might know,
No, the crosswalk idea.
There's a proposed bike path in the area. So again, 5-10 years down the road, maybe there are folks who are utilizing the bike path, who are spending time there, who want to, whatever it is you guys have planned for the old train station, perhaps there's a way to create some congruency there with some public space or public use. And maybe we should talk about that now. That's part of this project. So if the utilities piece is too expensive, would you guys consider a crosswalk and some kind of public easement or access at the train station?
Yes, I think that, we could certainly look into that. And I'm thinking of the cost. The cost, obviously, on both ends of a crosswalk are making them, installing handicap ramps and that. But apart from that, I don't think there's anything in the street itself, other than marking the street. All the construction is on either side of the street. Yeah, we would take a serious look at that.
I was just curious. I don't know how the rest of the board would feel about that, but I'm just kind of throwing it out. And if we're going to start thinking about resources, whether it's town or state, maybe we need to think bigger about the whole area.
If maybe you could put your ideas down on paper and give them to the planning director, and he could share them with us, that would give us more of a
I think
starting
it depends
point.
on how the rest of the board feels about
Marcella?
those
Yeah,
things.
I was gonna say, I like the spirit of what Anna's saying in terms of thinking down the road, because I think that's where we were going toward. And I think to make it even wider, I think even as part of the comprehensive plan, maybe this would come into play. It would be good for us, for everybody in the town, to start thinking of the downtown, not just as a section of Main Street from here to here. I think the downtown district should really be more whole encompassing to a much wider, more consolidated district that has recognizable entry points and exit points. We're going to hear the next project we're going to hear about. Obviously, we've talked about that being one of the entry points. So I'm all for. I think for the purposes of the timeline of this project, I think even with thinking big, there's always priorities, and I think the immediate priority, in my view, is to consolidate what we are already doing all the way up to that corner at least, because thinking on even 5 years down the road, like Anna's saying, all these things that Anna described make great sense, and they're going to start actually happening, but the framework needs to be there, and if this is going to happen, we cannot miss this opportunity, and that's what I'm concerned about.
Anyone else? Comments?
So I think there's kind of related to this overview, we received an email today from a resident that I think absolutely has to be well discussed, and perhaps even if the board doesn't agree, passed to the applicant.
Allergies.
Also, I reached out to the Upper Charles Trail committee. I got an email this afternoon. I asked Peter. I mean, it came late, so we probably can't. But it does have some issues that they're suggesting us to consider about this project. Perhaps specifics about the project, but also the roadway. And I think that is under our purview to at least not ignore those things that, if I recall them saying that access on Homer is critical to that part of the trail. So there's quite, I mean, I did pass it on to me, or we could pass it now, or you could bring it up, but I don't know that that's.
So that could work well off of the idea of maybe a crosswalk there related to whatever access point they're looking for, right? So, I mean, again, I don't know what you guys are going to do with that old train station, but let's say it's a coffee shop and I'm on the trail and I come by and I pull my bike in and I can sit down. That's the vision, right? Presumably, maybe. I don't know. I don't know what your vision is, but if we can build for it.
Question for you, but the way I understand, and I don't know if it's legally feasible to link these two ideas, because that's a separate property and it's not part of the application. Right. So I'm not sure, can we actually?
We can ask. I don't think we can require.
Exactly.
But we can ask.
I think the point is well made. It isn't part of the project, and the project was designed without reliance upon anything that happens across the street. We could have asked for parking across the street as part of the permit process. We didn't do that because we wanted to keep those two properties separate, at least for permitting. For planning now, I mean, obviously, if this project is built, then I guess the owner's next eyes would turn to that project and say, well, okay, now that we've had this in the ground and up, then what does it make sense to do there at that time? Not, I know we want to think ahead, but we haven't sufficiently thought of.
Yeah, no,
what would
and
be
just
there.
like we can't necessarily require you to put utilities
Right.
underground, we can't require you to put a sidewalk either, or a crosswalk, but we can ask.
I think my problem with stretching beyond this site, even a crosswalk, and I mentioned this last time, is that I would not, as the planning board, simply want to say, put a crosswalk in. I would want that to be analyzed as part of all the work we're doing in the downtown and safety issues and what other professional designers have thought about this. I also don't think, I think it's like building a bridge to nowhere to me, that this is something that, yeah, I think through the comprehensive plan project, we should figure out this greater scope of downtown and then make the decisions based on that, not sitting in here before that process even begins and say, hey, we should do all this way before anyone on comprehensive plan has even talked about it. That seems to me really putting the cart before the horse. Yes, it would have been great to have a comprehensive plan done last year, and then this would all feed into that. But we don't have that. And I'm not sure what to do about the trails. We talked to them. Everything is so far out there. And I am really hesitant to take a chunk of sidewalk. I'm not sure what the proposals was. If it's things like bike racks and stuff, great. But to back this building off the street where it's trying to create a streetscape and leave room for a bike lane that may or may not ever happen, and that has to go in and then come back out on the street to get around the other residential properties, I think that's so far down the road that I don't see how it fits right now.
So we have complete streets in Ashland. Forget about the Upper Charles Trail. It's our obligation to review that, in my opinion. So, and when we specifically know there's an issue with the trail here, I think that rises it up even more.
And I would add that comprehensive plan is an aspirational process. It's not a design at a micro level process. So under no circumstances am I suggesting that we cannot, this applicant to actually put a crosswalk. But if the applicant is willing to say, I will pay for a crosswalk once you have a plan as to where you want it, and if you want it somewhere, I will do it. Or if the applicant says, yes, I'm willing to give public easement of some kind to the use of a beautiful train station right in the middle of Ashland that has historic value, then those things can essentially be there for the future. They're not immediate, ooh, here you go, here's the keys, feel free to use it. It's more of a conversation with the applicant if the applicant has a vision. And it's hard for me to imagine the applicant has zero vision for the future. I'm sure it's been thought through because it's a business. You want to do well in that commercial space, and presumably you want to develop. And you don't have to tell us what you want to do, but we can still have the conversation. And if we can find something that works for the applicant and works for the town in the future, why not try to have that conversation?
I understand what you're saying, but that's not where my emphasis is. That to me is perhaps, like I said, building a road to nowhere, and I'm not interested in that right now. I want to plan first. I want to plan and then to follow the plan, not to imagine all kinds of things that just as likely that you could put the crosswalk in the wrong spot.
We have,
right?
and again, I'm not saying let's
So.
decide where the crosswalk is. No, I think we have jurisdiction to plan. I'm planning ahead. I'm thinking ahead. That space that's being proposed is a space that's going to bring people there. It's going to create energy. Those people are going to want to do things. They're going to want to use that space. I think we have an obligation to start thinking about that.
Well, why don't we go on to, like we said, we did get an email.
So please know, I didn't have time today to pass it along, so the applicant does not know about that email. And I have a printed copy here with Terry's name on it, but he has not seen that, so.
I can describe the email if it's helpful, Tricia.
And we may need to, I mean, I assume everyone on the board has seen it, and we may need to, because we're already at 30 minutes on this project and we have longer discussions, we may need to push this out.
Do we want to talk to the applicant about the fire department letter, which the applicant must have seen?
The applicant did see that letter, and today I do want to note right before the meeting, there was an email. They did revise that, and that's going to go off to the fire department.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was received today, so, but the applicant did, Rick Salvo, the civil engineer, did submit a new turning radius plan as requested by the fire department.
So let me just put this out there right now. Do we have too many topics still to discuss before we would recommend this going to the design review committee? Now, that said, the applicant can go to the design review committee when they are ready, but they do so at their own risk, right? If the design review says something and we go a different direction, that's at the applicant's risk, right? So what is the board? How is the board feeling about moving this forward? Or are we not ready yet based on what we received today, based on some of these comments?
Could I ask a question, Madam Chair?
Quick question.
Sure. The question is the relationship between this board and the design review. How does that work? In other words, it's not duplicative. It's not meant to be duplicative. Is there a sphere of influence that the design review committee has that's totally different and distinct from what you have, or do they overlap?
We have a list. Which I thought had been forwarded on to you, though I'm not sure, of the recommendations that the planning board, a list of things that the planning board is giving to the design review committee that we would like them to look at in regard to this project. Our concern always is if this project changes in between now and then, it could have a ripple effect into those decisions as well.
So we don't anticipate a change. In other words, the composition of the project, commercial versus mixed use, that's not going to change. The number of units is not going to change. The size of in response to your specific questions, we actually got quite specific about the
I understand, but
relationship.
I have a 5-person board,
Okay.
right? And so this has to be a decision here before it's a
understand.
decision there,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
So, to the board, where are we sitting on this right now? It sounds like there's other things that there are obvious disagreements on the board about, that maybe we need some more information. Like, I don't know what information came through with trails. It obviously came in late in the game, so we don't know what that is, and they didn't bring it up 2 weeks ago when we talked about it. We received the email today. Are there other things that we're going to want to dive into more deeply here? Do we want to start to address this email today?
I mean, I think it's great that the attorney showed up and answered their questions. It's hard without the architect here to fairly discuss the email, because the email deals with design, right, and architecture. If the chair permits, we can certainly discuss it and see what we feel about it, but I do feel like the applicant deserves a way to respond to that prior to design review, because if the architect believes that these ideas are viable, I think that's worth discussing by this board, especially since frankly, it looked a lot to me like what we have happening maybe at Main Street, which does create that kind of spirit in our downtown that's uniquely consistent. So I like to explore it, but I feel like it's not particularly fair without the review by the applicant.
Well, why don't we take a few minutes, and I mean just a few minutes, to kind of get a general sense of the board about that email. But we're not going to discuss it. We don't have time to discuss it at length when we just received it today, right?
You want to go in order? And
Don't want to force
I
anyone
have
to
some
go in
comments,
order, but
if we want to.
Where I am with this project is, I think we are ready to take on, from what I understood the last time, the architect was willing to look at the materiality of it, and which is what I think was the main concept of that email this afternoon. And I think they were willing to look at that, right, the composition and the other conversations that we just had. I'm not sure that it's fair to put all that on this applicant, because the location of it, there's a lot going on the other Main Street. That's a different, this is a little off that. It is a continuation in many sense, but I feel like it's a lot more focus that we should do on the project versus looking at connecting the bigger picture at this point. It doesn't feel right to me for this particular project. But I think it's the answers, at least what he presented, feels really bang on correct for me in my view, but that's just me.
Marcelo?
Well, three things. The first one, relative to the design review committee, at the last meeting we said we have these questions for you, and we feel that this is almost ready for review. We had a list, and we sent those questions. Those questions were answered. I believe, to my satisfaction at least. I think we're rarely going to see a project, that is hitting off the bat like 95% of everything we're asking for. I think, in my viewpoint is that we understand this very well. We know the effort that has taken place to make this project compliant, and for the most part, it is almost by right. So I think this could go to the design review committee with a list of directives that we give them to review, while some of the other subjects are resolved. Number two, I agree with Deepa. I think it's in my view much more important to focus on what resources can we have or put at the town's disposal to try to get the underground utilities moved. I think that is an immediate need and something that the town will benefit for a long time. It cannot be done later when they've already done the sidewalks to comply with the rest of the work that we are doing, when the utilities are not consistent with that, which is part of the design of the rest of the work. It doesn't make sense. So we're going to go like half the way there. I think that would be a huge mistake. And number three, on the email, I saw this email. I have a different viewpoint on it. I think it's very interesting that somebody took the effort to actually think about this. I think that's great. I think the approach is, in my view, is completely misguided. I think there's a whole emphasis on the precedent of the buildings next door, which have a flat roof, which is not allowed in this district, and the effort is to advocate for a flat roof. Doesn't make sense to me, and to set out those buildings, which in my viewpoint, they're not a great architectural piece that is defining anything on the downtown. They're more of a residual type of architecture of the 60s. I don't think that should be the baseline for what we do in the town, and what has been approved on the other side of the street is very different. It's actually more consistent with what the applicant is proposing for this project. In my view, I think there's no relationship, and that's why I would be happy to send this for design review and really emphasize our efforts and our energy on trying to get the piece that really affects downtown in the next couple of years, when this gets done, actually accomplished.
Kate?
I personally like some of the ideas in the email, and I mean, I guess that I don't know how willing the applicant will be to explore those, right? Because they've done a design, they've done what they want to maximize the units, right? With no, like, the front space is great, but we know the flaws of like having, play space or anything for kids. So I don't know if they'll be willing to, but I think that if hopefully they would take it serious, and we can add that as part of a design review to at least explore that. And I think the trails conversation, probably the email should probably be passed on to design review as well, because there are specifics. Some of them are specifics to design that would be the site, but I think that we shouldn't invite a group to have a conversation to coordinate and not follow through on at least some coordination about that.
Kevin?
I think for me, the biggest question that was left for this being ready to go to design review was the turning radius thing. So if that was a satisfactory answer, that was kind of the last thing that would change the shape of the building, other than obviously the email. But to me, that is asking for a design that's completely outside of the standards in the bylaw that they've already put a lot of effort into design to. So maybe there's some material changes and things like that, other than the white clapboard, to help it blend into town, if you will. But I think a complete redesign would be a big ask and would be against the past effort that was put into writing that downtown bylaw. And then just quickly on the utility thing, I think that's really a question for the town to get involved in, while we have a utility contractor who, a building contractor doesn't do that work. The people who are out there now do that work and are the ones who could give you a price for that work, whether it's part of, if there's fast enough funding to get them a change order on their existing contract, or to at least come back. They are the ones who work with those utilities who know how to do that. They'll have a site contractor who will do their excavation, but that's still not the utility guy. So maybe the town could at least get a ballpark figure out of the current contractor, so we know what we're up against, and maybe there could be some contribution and that kind of thing. But
just to answer that, Kevin, I think I'm happy to work with the town. The town manager is really kind of spearheading that project. The one thing I do know is that obviously the downtown project has been designed, it's been built. And, the downtown project, as you see right now, they're putting curbs in, they're putting the sidewalk in. But 18 months ago, that's when we were putting the conduit in, and so that's that phase of the project. The conduit is already kind of passed. And so, with that extension of that, and I know we could do it.
Yeah,
it's just a matter, but the extension of that goes back to the starting line with what needs to be done.
But I think well taken. But my understanding is that this project is going to have to move the pole for where they terminated those conduits, because it's in the middle of the driveway anyways. So something's going to have to happen. So I agree with Kevin. Unless there's some technical reason
Well, just
in terms of the
moving
size
the
of the
pole
wiring
is
or something,
different than
but it's going to be
undergrounding.
like a junction box, if you will, there, and extend another, whatever, 50 feet of conduit and wire. That would be the extra work with the excavation. Maybe there's a shared, something that they
I can work with the town manager to see if we can get a price on it. But
let's ask him, because I think it's definitely worth it, if we can finalize that.
I agree. It's worth asking the question. And the thing is that this isn't going to be the only extension of these underground systems, right? It's like they're going to hopefully keep happening around town.
There's a web.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, a little bit of a time. So let's at least ask the question and figure out what it takes Kevin knows more about this probably than any of us, and I don't know what the extent of how difficult a problem of it is, but let's ask the question as soon as possible.
Does it
understand how that
matter
works.
if it's close to the train station? I mean, in theory, it's walkable distance, maybe a couple miles. Can we try to go after state money for the MBTA work or not? Like, can that in any way be remotely connected to the MBTA issue?
What's the issue with the MBTA?
The MBTA housing?
The requirements relating to the MBTA. You know how the state has some mandates, if you will, relating to the MBTA work? Because we are a community that has a train going through it.
Like the zoning?
Correct. So my understanding is some communities have worked with the state to get funding relating to infrastructure around trains. So this is, in theory, infrastructure pretty close to our train tracks.
Yeah, it'd be very similar how we have money coming in for the quiet zone and the Cherry
Yep.
Street crossing and all those elements, yeah. You know, I think.
So can we just, let's pursue that question about funding, about sources, about difficulty, about, it's a big, it's a big ask. And, if needed, maybe, if Kevin has more information about this, that would be helpful to you. But let's see if we can get some, we're not going to figure it out here.
Yeah, no, like I said, I
So-
can reach out to the town
Okay.
manager and I can see if he can ask Gioso, who's a contractor, to see
Okay.
what it would take, right?
Okay.
And go down that route
Yeah.
first.
But I think, Tricia, we are ready to go to design review. It sounds like
Okay.
the majority of this board, myself excluded.
Well, I didn't get
is-
my chance to speak,
Oh, okay.
actually.
Oh, I thought you didn't. Yeah.
I did not. But I wanted to say, I obviously looked at this and read this email today. And while I feel like the points in it were obviously well-spoken, someone who's looking at the town of Ashland, I think it's really only looking at one component part of that. And actually the forms that the project is proposing is equally present on Main Street as well and in the surrounding area. To me, the images that were put forth were really interesting, perhaps related to the ones for 10 to 60 Main Street, obviously, that I had submitted for a group discussion. But having a whole town in that similar of a language gives me a little bit of disquiet, actually, of the consistency of that language would be, I think, quite overwhelming. So, and I agree that the buildings next door are not the ones I want to emulate in doing anything new. I'm not sure that's what was being said, but I'm almost thinking, yeah, in part it helps to make that transition, like the brick. I mean, the bagel table building uses brick on the bottom to kind of make that connection into the town. And so it really might be a question of materials, I think, as Deepa started off saying. So I think with that being said, was there a motion coming that you were thinking about making?
Yeah, I mean, it seems to
And
me
I
like
don't wanna
it
take it
seems
from you.
to me like the majority of our board is comfortable with the design as is, rather than the design presented in the email, with some focus of materiality. And we had a draft for design review, and I guess I'm thinking maybe it's time to make a motion to take that draft letter that we were going to send to design review, maybe edit it slightly to indicate that the preference of the board, majority of the board, is choosing the design as is with a focus of materiality. And the reason I say that is I believe this letter was written by a member of design review, so I think we should clarify that we as a board prefer it as is with focus of materiality, all of the things listed. And then I think we need to add 3 things: the sustainability checklist, the Upper Charles Trail letter, and then the fire department back and forth. So that the full
I totally agree
package.
with Anna's summary, but on any subjects, can we make sure, maybe we can go over the list, can we make sure that nothing is vague? I think it would behoove everybody to have the tasks that we're asking the design review to accomplish, like the Charles River Trail.
Yep.
I think it's good to forward the information, like Kate suggested. I agree personally with Tricia that having seen the presentation when we had that conversation with them, it's not even it's not even vague. There's a lot of ideas, but I don't see. I want to see the email, but I would.
Does anybody have it?
I would
I do.
prefer not to
Okay.
not to have the design review committee open a whole discussion that we are not going to be part of, or something that was so vague in my view from what I heard in terms of not even understanding where
Do you
these
want to
things
read
going
it
to
to
go.
us?
So.
I can read the list if we want to modify any of these things. And we should know that we're well over our 30 minutes here, so, okay. This is the list that we gave. Scale at the street, building materials and colors, facade details and glazing, site materials and paving, relation to the work being done in downtown, landscaping, pocket park, public places, signage, relation to the train station across the street, sustainability details, see new best practices document, screening of mechanical and electrical equipment, possible protection for pedestrians from vehicles. I think that,
But isn't that like 3 or 4 that we can strike through?
What do you mean?
Like scale on the street, what does that mean? We saw the scale on the street, we are comfortable with it, it's compliant.
Yeah.
What are we asking for?
we may not be asking for anything at this point, if we're comfortable with it.
So things like that are kind of vacuous, or concealment of mechanical equipment. We already requested that. The applicant has said is going to do it.
Okay.
I'm not sure that, unless maybe they can ask him to cut a section and prove it, to get a little bit more, but I'm not sure that a lot of information a lot of energy has to be spent on that. Like the pocket park, that's a discussion that was brought by Anna, which was very interesting, and we talked about it. They propose, or the architect presented last time, the idea of a courtyard that relates to the station. I think that's more important that the design review committee look into, because they already started an idea, they have to develop it. And there was another one that seemed a little vague, or that we already had
Building
about.
materials and colors, facade details and glazing, site materials and paving, landscaping, pocket park, signage, relation to the train station across the street, sustainability details, possible protection for pedestrians from vehicles. So, does everyone, can we take off scale at the street? Because that does start to talk about volume and
I
massing.
think that's okay to take out. Like I said, I think if we're clear from the get-go, maybe in a sentence, that we reviewed the comment from one of the members of design review, that the majority of our board essentially is comfortable with the design as is, and that we're narrowing in now on details. I think that gets us to the same point. I definitely want to add, I have not seen the Charles River email. I don't know if Kate can tell us about it.
I can
Because-
read. I sent it to Peter before the meeting, but I guess he didn't have time to send it out.
And the fire department thing, I think we need to add, right? The fire department issue.
And like include the materiality of that pathway there.
So if
So-
that still has to go back to the fire department, is that coming back to us, or can it go to, or does it need, is that for us to really focus on? I mean, I'm kind of thinking out loud.
I think if the
So-
fire department approves the turning radiuses, that's great, but they also had asked something about not having it be grass or
Yeah.
something about the materiality of that
And I
pathway,
think
which is
the-
great for design review to find something that kind of looks like grass but holds
Yeah.
a fire truck, right?
That's what I'm thinking.
And the architect said that they were proposing something like that, so that's part of the landscape item of design review. They can get into that and define it. I think that's.
So maybe we
that's
should
a
put in
good comment.
parentheses next to that, including review of the fire department
For the-
recommendations
for the
and
structural wise,
impact
right? 'Cause
on,
It's half on the structure and half outside, so it's.
on what, on landscape design?
So landscape, including accommodation of fire egress?
Fire lane, I think, it's called fire lane.
Yep.
The question I have about the fire department, I know that when we were walking, did our site visit, I mentioned the unfortunate fact that we had to put a roadway through there, which was all green. And I think the general consensus was that you would defer to the fire department, as would be expected, on safety issues like that.
Right, so what's the question?
The question is whether we use grasscrete, it allows grass to go through, which is a proven use, which we would use basically to create more of a kind of look that the planning board would like to see aesthetically, whether that comes within the province of the fire department or is it the planning board? I know you're not going to go
Well, what's going to happen is that we would be looking for recommendations probably for the design review committee, because
Okay.
maybe it's a third option.
Okay.
And we would want to see, yes, this is acceptable to our fire department and to protect our residents who will be living in those units.
But,
Right.
but there's a question of whether that requirement is related to public safety, or it's simply a preference that the department has. I've run up against
I understand,
fire
I understand,
departments
I understand,
requirements
I
other
understand,
places.
but we're going to make that decision based on our fire department. Okay?
Okay, I
Okay.
hope you'll do so consonant with.
We will
Constant-
give it a good deal of thought.
Consonant with site plan review.
So, so with the addition of those items, this is something that Peter can edit. We can send it around for comment. I think we're basically there.
Yeah, I think we could, I mean, I'm comfortable making that motion with the edits, and I don't know if we need
Okay.
to vote on that, but if we do. I mean, is there consensus at least to send that?
Yeah, I think we have a consensus
Yeah.
to send it to the planning board,
I think
right?
we're
Let's
fine.
just do it. All right.
Design review, yeah.
Oh, sorry, design
so-
review. What did I say?
To ourselves.
Oh, definitely not. All right. All right, so we will, so this is going to design review. Do we need to continue it ourselves until some strange date?
And the design review, we're gonna get you on the next design review agenda.
Design review next week, don't they need next Thursday?
I don't know.
It kind of depends.
They were every off week.
They do, but sometimes there's nothing on their agenda, and so if they haven't,
We fill in their agenda.
they need some notice as
And I
well.
do also have to, there's a week notice I have to send out, so I do have to notice that. So I just gonna do the notice, and then we'll get you on the first agenda, and obviously I'll look tomorrow.
I tried.
You try, I know, that's all you can do. You know, college effort. But yeah, we'll move it forward on the design as soon, I mean, we gotta do it as soon as possible. And then for the planning board meeting, the next meeting with the planning board is the 25th. So I think it's appropriate to look to this first meeting in June, to come back to the planning board, and hopefully we can get a date with the design review committee. Obviously, we will get a date with them for that.
Okay.
Okay? So we'll
Okay.
next hear this on June 8th.
And depending if they're going, how long they speak to the design review committee, that may push this out so that the design review committee can do their work. Okay?
Thank you very much. I understand you took more than you are. Half an hour. Appreciate you taking that.
All right, well, there are complex issues, so,
I make
thank
a
you.
motion to continue the 949 Homer hearing to June 8th.
I'll second it.
Roll call vote,
Deepa Venkata.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
and Tricia Kendall, aye. Okay, so that's continued. All right, next on our agenda is, how could I forget? 10 to 60 Main. Special permit and site plan review continued from, April 13th.
Good evening.
Scott, do you have a presentation this evening? What were you anticipating?
Well, yes. Hi. I had sent out
Yes.
the material last Friday, so I would assume that we could pull that up
Yep.
on the screen. Present that.
Scott did send the email late that I was able to download, but I was not able to send out to the board.
So you're talking about the revisions today? Yeah, that's just floor plan revisions that we can just talk to.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct.
I just
Yeah.
want to see that
Yeah.
can see it.
on the record.
On the record, we got it in before noon of last Friday.
This, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I get you. and ready.
So good evening, everyone. I think Rich and Joe are online. And I'm Scott Richardson with Gorman Richardson Lewis Architects, representing the Ashland Properties project at 1060 Main Street. So at our last meeting on April 13th, we had presented some refinement of the concept that we had presented at the previous meeting, and got some feedback relative to the overall appearance and imagery that seemed to not represent, or at least replicate, the feeling of the initial rendering that you had seen the month before. So what we did do was basically kind of regroup and incorporate those design features and elements that were cited, such as the window sizing and massing, the massing of the masonry or whatever material we're ending up using for the horizontal and vertical elements, some railing elements for the balconies, and again, the towers. Basically, the comments from many of you were that you liked the variety of the tower design from the previous presentation, so we basically did replicate those fairly successfully. So if we want to move through the images, again, this is one of those drawings that you kind of do for a street elevation, but obviously you're never going to see these buildings this way. So if you want to run to the next one, yeah. So just starting off, as you come down Myrtle Street and around the site, basically just a series of images that I think you're probably somewhat familiar with at this point. So as we turn the corner, again, you're looking at number 10 and number 20 being renovated in place and adapted to provide residential units on the upper floors and commercial space along Main Street. Next one. Again, we provided views with trees and without, so a little better view of the buildings without the proposed landscaping in front of them. Next one, Peter. And then as we're coming down, heading south on Main Street, again, we have the view of the first two buildings to be renovated, and then the subsequent building beyond. Next. Again, without landscaping. And then we're basically in the driveway then that runs in front of 10 and 20 Main Street, and as we're, say, walking down that driveway towards the new buildings. And then this would be as if we were kind of in front of the bagel table, I believe, looking towards the new structures, basically incorporating the railings, some larger window massing, so we have kind of the Juliet balconies on the units. We've narrowed up the structural spacing of the elements, both the vertical and horizontal elements. We've incorporated the detail at the top of the pilasters, if you will, that people commented on that they liked. The beam, exposed beam before the roof edge. We did actually increase the roof pitch on the gabled roofs. Obviously, from this angle, it's hard to see that because, again, it's higher. We could go for a higher elevation of our view, but we did increase that roof pitch. Go to the next one, Peter. And then as we are entering, say, coming up Pleasant Street, we would enter the site as previously kind of conceptualized. We have proposed bus drop-off, pickup areas on each side of the driveway. The tower elements have been redesigned to reflect the previous concept that we had presented the month before. And again, the massing of the windows was updated. What else? And again, trying to create a little bit of a softer effect with the rendering technique that we used on these presentation drawings. We have a large, kind of plaza area on the right that could be utilized, as we mentioned, for carts, whether they're vendor carts or activities for the residents. It's a fairly substantial plaza area in front of the building to the right that's alongside the driveway as you go into the site. And we have actually increased the plaza area that's in front of the building, in front of number 40/50 on the right, that's directly opposite the corner spot, to again promote some outdoor activities, some outdoor dining. Hopefully we get a restaurant in there, and just providing again more gathering space, seating areas, and landscaping areas. Go ahead. And then again, standing on that kind of front plaza area, looking back into the courtyard spaces. And this would be if you were on Pleasant Street, coming down, looking at the entrance element, entrance drive with the tower elements on both sides. And the connector that's beyond is kind of proposed to be kind of a white clapboard connector between kind of the mill building effect. And that's where the driveway goes down to the rear parking area and provides access both down and back up from the rear driveway and parking areas. Yeah, and I think there's one more. Yep. And again, this driveway, as always, has been proposed just as in only. As you're coming north on Main Street, you'd be able to enter go down the ramp to the lower parking areas and access around the building. So as we kind of worked through the kind of the iteration of this, as we worked on the floor plan, which we did include those here, we are basically looking at being able to accommodate about 195 units now. I'm sorry for kind of the fluctuation of back and forth, but as we look closer at each floor and how we incorporate our units, we also determined that moving the kind of the gym, the community space, the rental office, and as we proposed, we wanted to do kind of an Ashland Mill kind of history room. We're proposing to have those on the lower level of building number 10, which this site plan, this plan indicates. So the lower level of building 10, which as you all walk through is, some storage area, some workshops, and also the boiler room. So that would be the area for the gym to support the complex, potentially a meeting space, a room dedicated to some history and artifacts of the mill, as well as the rental office. The basement level of the next building, which is building 30, is proposed to be all commercial space. As you may know, that there's gyms down there right now that it seems to be an ideal location for that, as well as some other rental areas. So we're hopeful that a commercial gym and maybe other support activities could occur there, would rent space there. And then with the reconfiguration of the building into this block, if you will, with the courtyard above, we have pretty much much more successful parking arrangement. We have much better access into the lower level, and then we have access to most all of the parking below the podium in this area. So we think it'll be a little more conducive to, number one, finding a parking space more easily, and again, determining whether there's reserves and numbered spaces for each unit to be determined. But otherwise, as you may recall, in the linear fashion we had previously, you were into each building, underneath the basement of each building to get your parking. So we think this is a more successful parking arrangement. We actually have about the same number of parking spaces as we had before, with fewer units. So I think that's a plus. And again, we're still working out the details of this, because this part of the site, the right-hand portion, has been a fairly substantial modification from what we had previously. I guess, yeah, next one. So again, the floor plan, as you've seen, we have the commercial spaces all along fronting on Main Street. The housing units are all behind, and as indicated here, we have, which is not reflected in the package you have, again, we've added units on number 10 to the back, and then just fine-tune the layout of the units on this floor as well as the upper floors. So the final, kind of where we are now is we have about 22,000 square feet of commercial space and 195 units and 373 parking spaces.
Could I make a comment?
Please.
So, I mean, big picture, I like what I see behind me, because finally we're not like retracing our steps to, hey, what did we do last time? But, you know, for commercial, we went from 30 to 26 to 22. We keep going down for commercial.
Mm-hmm.
For units, we went from 200 to 188, and now we're back to almost 200. So last time we talked and we discussed affordability, I made peace with 10% affordability, because I thought, okay, 10% affordability, less units, more commercial, I can balance this out. Now I'm not so sure about 10% affordability, because now we're decreasing commercial, we're increasing units.
15%.
It was 15, but what is 195?
Where
is it?
Now I'm like, I want
Rich,
more than.
Any thoughts, Rich, on?
Now I want 25% affordability,
now
because
that
we're back to almost 200.
195, any comment?
Well, first of all, it's gone down to 15% affordability, not 10. And, you know, the big issue is, you know, this thing has to be financeable and it has to be buildable. And we still are faced with that very serious problem of being able to have enough units and the right amount of mixed use to make this project financeable. So, you know, the comment of go back to 25%, it's not buildable. It won't happen. The project just won't go. We cannot build it and have 25% affordability. So we're doing what we can to squeeze as many units as possible, and still we're under 200. You know, we've also made major changes to the design, all of which are increasing our cost. I mean, our latest pro forma has brought our cost of construction up another $6 million. This podium is massive, and there's a lot of expense here. And, you know, I am talking to national developers to partner with it on this project, and we're really struggling, and they are very much struggling with getting the project to pencil. Not to mention that we're still having supply chain issues costs of goods are high, and the biggest problem we're having is interest rates are up. So we have to do everything we can to tighten our belts in every way with construction and the ability to have as many units possible to generate revenue. All of these things are at play. So we're just trying to work with everything we can to still make this a financeable, buildable project. So
I think as we go along, what I'm happy to see is that changes have been made just to think differently. Hey, we've always thought about this part of the project as having this program, but maybe it doesn't have to. Maybe it can have this program instead, right? That we're getting out of that locked way of thinking and considering something different, and that's just offering some other possibilities. They may not be possibilities necessarily that we went in the right direction, but at least it's the thought process is at least getting looser, that we can consider other things. For me, I think there's two things obviously that need to happen. One is the economic feasibility of the project. If it's not feasible, it doesn't get built. But it doesn't get built either if we don't like it. And if the town doesn't like it, it doesn't get built for that reason either. So so that's something we need to, I don't know which of those needs to come first, but I think at least here we need to look at the design issues and the residential to commercial issues about what the town needs, and hopefully those align with financing out there in the greater world, that something will happen. But if it's not good for Ashland, it's just not a good project. Mm-hmm. So no matter how financially feasible it becomes. So
I think it's all about data for me. I respect what Rich is saying, but let's talk about that, right? So the last time we saw this proposal, when we fell in love with it, it was 188 units. Now that we're really falling in love with it, we're back to 195. So if these details that we're insisting on are the expense and we're adding millions of dollars, I think, Rich, you need to give us the actual data. You need to tell us, where is the money at? Is it one specific feature? Because if we start to have that conversation, we need to have that conversation, because I, for one, am not comfortable with heavy density at 15% or 10% affordability. If we're going to have heavy density, 200 to me is dense. 195 and 200, it's a marginal difference. We're looking at density. So we need to talk about affordability. If you're not willing to go there, then tell us what very expensive feature you want us to give up to go back down to 188. Because I'd like to have that conversation.
Sure, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate Tricia's comments as well. And, at the end of the day, we are doing everything we can to work with the board, and we've made lots of changes, as has just been noted a minute ago. Yes, we're trying to get the unit count up a little bit. At the end of the day, it's changed 7 units. So, there's not a huge swing of the pendulum here. And to be honest, it may end up, and Scott and I have to talk about it more, but it may end up going back down a little bit, because we've gotten some feedback from one potential partner that our units are too small. So, this is a little bit fluid. And quite honestly, I don't think that we've really had any drastic change here in the unit count. Again, it's 7, and it may go back down to 3 or 4. The affordability, we had to make that change, again, just to get the job to pencil and work on a pro forma and be able to be financeable. So I'm kind of, we're kind of stuck at that. At the same time, again, we're trying to come up with a product that the town is going to really appreciate and love. And, to your point, I think that we do have something here that everybody's liked a lot. So, we want to continue that dialogue. We certainly don't want to get stuck here. As far as the actual expense of items, I can come back with, some very specifics. But I will tell you, the podium is a huge thing. And then, the redesign, those are some very expensive features, the way we are presenting it now, the windows and the towers and so on. So there's a lot to it. But again, we're trying to be as cooperative and work with you as best as possible.
Where do we want to go with this tonight? I had sent just a collection of images and links to the board for the possible discussion at this meeting, but it could be another meeting if the board wants to go in another direction. So I'm looking for.
I may have missed that.
Oh, don't remember when Peter sent it out. What do we want to talk about at this meeting? That's a general question for the board. How do we want to direct our thoughts?
I mean, to me, I think we're getting into I for one like the design. I just don't like the numbers right now. And I feel like I need a little bit more data on that. That's what's left for me before maybe we start talking about design review. However, I think I recall there were prior kind of revolving big picture issues like Concom, and that I don't know when that should start. I almost feel like there should be parallel process to make sure this project is clear with Concom fully. So I would suggest we start just to discuss that and get this towards Concom as quickly as possible so that we don't end up with some kind of surprise on the Concom side later in the process.
Concom is essentially completed.
Do we have a report from them or some kind of memo on that?
There was basically there was a meeting last August 25th. Cornerstone met with Concom. They requested some additional information on the ORAD, which he submitted on November 1st.
So can we get a memo from Concom recently, not almost a year ago?
So last meeting, Peter was supposed to get with the Conservation Commission about how we would sync up with their project. I don't know if that happened, but that's my recollection.
I think that's what I'm
from the
remembering.
planning board, and yeah.
I did touch base with Conservation. I haven't received that memo yet, and I will get an updated memo. But I think you still have to file with Conservation.
Right, that's the part that I'm kind of missing.
Yeah.
So
I disagree with you, Scott.
Rich, correct? I thought that the filings had been completed previously. I was looking back through the folders today to find that out, but maybe you don't have an update.
I did not get that sense. I recall counsel for the applicant making it seem like it was all set a year ago, but it left me with some questions as to how all set we really are. And I, for one, would feel comfortable getting this over to Concom as quickly as possible to really check all the boxes.
We'll follow up with them, with Cornerstone.
That's just me. I don't know how the rest of the board feels about that.
No, I was going through it today to do the checklist of the 12 items that we need, and that was what I came across, that it was substantially completed. But we'll follow up and let you know.
So along with that, the floodplain was still part of this special permit. And I do recall the very first meeting of this, because I was new on the board, saying I don't understand our jurisdiction versus conservation versus state law versus, so I think that may come out of conservation, that they say we got it, and we can take their recommendation if we think that makes sense. But there is something about floodplain that we are somehow responsible for as planning board. So we need to iron that out as well. But again, that may come out of conservation.
Yeah, and again, this is all in our submission letter to you last July, outlining all of these items on the floodplain, conservation, stormwater management, and so on. So I was going back and re-summarizing where we are on these. So we will, again, create a kind of a document that summarizes all.
Yeah,
of
so I would assume that you just told us it substantially changed, that even if that is true, there has to be something looked at. So something's amiss here.
And I do believe, obviously, this project, the site plan has substantially changed.
Yeah, it's
right?
time.
And I don't think you've been back to conservation since you removed the building and created the podium.
No, we have not.
And I'm also concerned about cost. So Rich is talking to developers. That's great. Costs are expensive, and they're going to keep going up, right? And so in my mind, let's get this to Concom ASAP, because clearly this site has some unique environmental issues. Correct. Let's get that cleared up so that we're confident that we are in a good place, because we're starting to fall in love with the design, not so much with the numbers and affordability, but let's get this wrapped up. That's my suggestion.
Yeah,
Marcelo?
we can get back with George Connors and
Yep.
get back to you quickly on that. You know, from a civil aspect, not a lot has changed on the ground floor. Everything has changed from above.
Right.
Our ground floor is still pretty much the same. So I did chat with George about it. We don't expect there to be any significant issue there. But it's a great point, and we will follow up with that right away.
Marcelo?
Yeah, my comments are primarily on the design changes that Scott explained, and I think the project is advancing. I wouldn't say I'm falling in love with the changes yet, and maybe I'm praying hard to get.
Someone has to.
Yeah. But so just quickly, in terms of the planning, I think that the planning of the project is made a lot.
I'm sorry,
The plan of the project makes a lot of sense to me. I really like, all these changes are really good. I think, Rich, you probably have found, I'm sure your performer has benefited from this approach. Much fewer vertical circulations. It makes a lot of sense. And what I like about it is the asymmetry. You know, they have different components. One building is larger, one building is narrower. That's all great. And I'm going to make a point on that next, but since we have the site plan on the screen, one of the things that we mentioned last time was the capability of this courtyard, this plaza, to have a character that is more tailored towards pedestrians than cars. And I think all the pedestrian plaza that has been developed it's a great improvement. I suggest that it would be probably worth considering, maybe you can study it, Scott, that if that pedestrian plaza that comes from both sides, I guess we need a laser pointer, if the same elevation of when you're walking in front of the streets would connect, maybe after the bus drop off, would connect at the same level on the beginning and the end of that plaza, so that cars would have to slow down, go up and down, and then the pedestrians can actually connect. I think it would be much more successful to connect the whole cycle on a pedestrian level without having a curb and a street on it. So in terms of the planning, I think that would benefit. But in terms of if we can go to the elevations, Peter, one of the things that I mentioned last time, and I'm still not convinced that has been resolved fully, is that the buildings being asymmetrical and the way they are laid out, they face very different conditions, right? Some of them face the street, a busy street. Some of them face a courtyard that is a much more intimate situation. Some face the old buildings, but they are all treated identically, and it's just one detail, one bay repeated like 500 times. I think the project would benefit, and some of this profile seems appropriate, maybe in a portion of the building, but having everything look the same, it makes it overwhelming in my view. I think all the windows are identical, all go the full width of the bay. It seems a little heavy. Sure. The second floor is the same as the third floor. That's something different than what you see in the historical buildings, right? They have these mansards, sure. So there's clearly a scale. And that maybe is something that you can study and actually take advantage of other possibilities, having parts of the building be really different as they address different situations. And that helps us with the roof, for example. I see that you've increased the pitch, which is something that was very, very unique to the original rendering that we all liked so much. And that improves, although not quite to that level, because you have a height limitation. So maybe it's worth, maybe in some areas or some parts of the building, so some units of the building of that configuration, what if the roof would come down and create some type of a mansard with dormers to kind of have a new interpretation of what the old buildings are, and that would create a much larger roof exposure with maintaining the height, and it would be different than maybe other part of the building that has this configuration. So there's some variation that I think is worth maybe studying. And one of the beautiful things about the original renderings, I remember, I think what I kind of, it caught my attention was the differentiation of the building proper and the bridge at the end, right? Have a different material, but now if we look at your drawings, the roofs go straight through. So there's really no difference. In your drawing, I believe the main buildings were higher and the roof, it was different.
Correct. Yes.
It was very successful, so maybe something that can be
I
studied.
was looking back at some of those earlier today and thinking some of the same things.
And lastly, I would say the towers are evolving into something interesting. They are, you know, markers of the entrance. I think they could also either be slightly different from each other, or if they are like this, I would be willing to make some exception to make the roof of those towers taller to really make a point of the market. It's not a habitable space, but it would make, and I think the original drawing had that which we all like. So it's something to consider. My last point was about affordable housing, but Anna already touched on that. So in terms of the design, I think it's advancing, but I think it needs now to start getting more texture on the different conditions that it addresses.
Other comments?
Well, I will just say, because I'm throwing out that when I didn't actually, because I thought I missed these drawings, and then we realized we didn't get them, but the noting the commercial going down is definitely disappointing, and I think that the affordable housing has to be potentially a trade-off. But I also think that, I mean, talking about the pro forma, that like successful developments they know what's coming there, right? And I'm still stuck with every single person living there is getting in their car. Maybe they can take that electric bus to the train, but they're not taking that electric bus to grocery shopping. So it's putting massive amounts of more cars on the road through our community, through our downtown. So that's not necessarily an improvement, but if there's some way to look at an anchor tenant, such as a grocery store and things that start seeming like that's a viable community, and I know that's hard, but I know developers do it. And I also know that people do develop more affordable housing and meet a pro forma. I mean, I don't know how that works, but like other developers do this. So I just want to put it out there. Like, I do read articles about that, and I just went to the planning conference and we had people give presentations that do it. So I understand if that's not the strength of this team and that's not our business, but I don't think that's only one answer.
Kevin, Deepa?
I kind of like some of Marcelo's points about the roof line and maybe especially trying to tie in that like Mansard look of whatever it is, 20, the second building in some places, and maybe breaking up the windows to make different looks to the different sides inside the courtyard and things like that, so it's not just a uniform look. And then I know that in the last meeting that I missed, you guys all seem to have pushed back towards this tower design, but I still think they look like a stair tower in a parking garage. And I missed some granite accents on the front of this building, and I feel like the towers are a place that could happen with all the granite that will be there from missing building number 30.
Deepa?
I'll say that every time I see these renderings, I notice something very different. So it's like, wait a minute, what did I see 3 weeks back? But kind of piggybacking of what Kevin just said, that kind of that connection between 10, 20 and the rest of the buildings, maybe that granite is that connection piece when you transition. Right now 10 and 20 have that old nice historic look, but suddenly this massive span of industrial looking building. I think bringing that material a little bit into that and then fading off into this industrial building may be a little bit of refinement on the design. I think out of all the renderings, what's really powerful for me is that connection between that Pleasant Street and that driveway into this whole campus. I wasn't thinking on the square footage, but I feel like those units on the right-hand side, is that building 40? which are like one beds, it will be really powerful to continue that commercial space into that wing, because there's so much activity just in your rendering. It shows so much life in that space. It feels like it would be really interesting to continue that commercial component down that street, because it somehow connects visually to that Pleasant Street. It feels like it'll just draw your attention to a larger area than what it probably is. And the other thing that is very powerful to me in these renderings is that colonnade that is on the other side of this building. So having that commercial component, kind of connecting the two, I think it'll be really interesting to see how that really is, and taking that, I mean, from privacy point of view, those one beds on that, both the sides, which is going to be active component, I don't know how that will really be comfortable for residents, if you will, right? Because that connection pathway, that colonnade, if you will, that one and the Pleasant Street entry connection, it feels like it's a really nice and active space. So I feel like if we really are looking at that 7-unit count and increasing commercial, I feel like that is the location that I feel like we should kind of look into further, because I feel like that rendering for me, out of all the renderings, the Pleasant Street connection rendering is the most powerful for me. And Marcel, I do agree that repetition of those windows, but I somehow feel like this is intended to be more like loft-like.
Yeah.
So I guess if we refine it a little bit, it may help us break that, and then idea of that getting away from that garage tower, I think. Yes, don't get me wrong, but for some reason today when I looked at these, like, that reminds me of Legacy Place. I must be hanging out at Legacy Place a lot at Dedham, but that just reminded me of that. But I feel like this has come a nice way. I think there's some refinements that we do that on, especially on those active zones. I think it'll be really interesting, and it may satisfy that commercial component and that count that we're looking at, hopefully.
And I guess, Deepa, what I meant is that some of that clearly is kind of a loft.
Yeah.
And that's okay if part of the project like that.
Yeah.
It just, I meant to say that it doesn't have to be everything.
True. Very true. Very true.
I'm going to open it up. I see one hand that's been raised a while. I'm going to open it up for some public comments, and then
Actually, can I make one comment before we do that about your email?
Well, I did want to go back to some of those images,
gotcha.
selfishly.
Okay.
Not all of them.
We'll come back to them.
Yes.
Okay. As long as we come back to
you
them,
don't mind.
because I think we should talk about them.
Thank you for your support. All right, so I'm going to open it up for public comment. I see one hand raised. So if you do want to comment on this tonight, please raise your hand right away, so now we're not getting them like one at a time. It would be helpful. Peter, can you see if Amanda is there?
Sure, so the first person with their hand up is Amanda. So Amanda, can you please unmute yourself and state your name and address?
Hi guys, can you hear me?
A little faint, but...
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. My name is Amanda Walsh and I live on Pine Hill Road. My question is, I have reviewed the traffic study for the Mills project along with some residents of my neighborhood, and there are some concerns that we have about it. First, the year and the timelines of the traffic study were based on 2017 numbers and 2020 numbers for the area. During the 2020 study, that was at the beginning and the height of the COVID pandemic, when traffic in town was the lowest in recent memory. If you've tried to go through downtown recently around rush hour or when school's let out, it's oftentimes gridlocked, causing an increased amount of time through the downtown area. With this potential increase in traffic that the Mills could bring, my question pertains to the surrounding streets that were included in the traffic study. In reviewing the diagrams and the data, I saw that there was a focus on Water Street, Main Street, Pleasant Street, Front Street, and Homer Ave. Myrtle Street was mentioned briefly, but no study was done on Pine Hill Road, which is extremely close to one of the proposed entrances and exits. I bring this up as I'm a resident of Pine Hill Road, and I know that it's used as a cut-through when downtown does gridlock. So my question is, what can the planning board do for the residents of Pine Hill Road to lessen the potential traffic increase or burden and keep that area, quiet in the charm that it does have? Can traffic become a topic of conversation at a future planning board meeting? And can a solution be looked into for the residents? Thank you guys so much.
I'll let anyone else jump in, but yeah, definitely we can revisit that. And given the changes in the plans and I know that we had brought up before the years of the study of the traffic, and wondering if that was still applicable, or if it was an appropriate year to base anything on. So we do appreciate those very specific comments and concerns, and we'll definitely, I don't have answers right now, but we'll definitely put it on our list for a discussion about how that would affect that neighborhood. Does anyone have any further comment on that right now? Okay.
The second person with a hand raised is Mr. Steve Morgan. Mr. Steve Morgan, can you please unmute yourself and introduce your name and, introduce yourself with your name and address?
Sure. Steve Morgan, 136 Concord Street, more or less behind this project. I just want to make two comments this evening. I guess the first comment is that I've gone to several of these meetings now, going back to over 2 years, some of the conservation meetings. And I've yet to see any of those comments really get summarized well, except occasionally they'll show up in minutes. So I'm wondering if there's going to be any kind of an active listing by this board of the feedback that residents have been making. I know I'm not the only resident that keeps providing feedback, but I haven't seen any summary documentation or tracking being taken of those feedbacks. I think it would be very beneficial to this or any major project that the board adopt the practice of bulletizing these as if they were action items or things to resolve, so that it can be categorized and addressed. So that's my first comment. My second comment is in regards to the conservation question that I heard earlier. I have been to some of those meetings, and I know generally people have made representations to conservation that there are no issues and they can do all these things back there with the river. I don't believe any of that's ever come to conclusion. So I agree with the board members who have suggested that it hasn't been filed and is a significant concern. One of my specific concerns, which I've brought up previously, is that we have two legs of the Sudbury River. And I look at this report that was filed. I just emailed the board about it again. There appears to be either a sloppiness or willful ignorance of that secondary flow, which goes over by the cemetery. We all know it's there. It's not in the report. If you go to GIS, you can easily find it. So it begs the question of why do we have reports in this project that are prepared by professionals that don't show actual conditions? There's water over there, it's flowing, we all know it's there. We also know there's a historic cemetery there, and either somebody was in their office and never walked the site or did something intentional here to support the project. So I really would suggest the board challenge the data that's put in front of it or hire professionals, because this is an example of a clear mistake on the way the project is organized relative to the existing wetlands conditions. And I understand that's primarily a conservation issue, but I did hear one board member take some ownership of floodplain issues and some other stormwater issues I believe are also in your jurisdiction, potentially. So I would really challenge the board to not let those things go by. These are easy to pick up on the documents that are being put in front of the board. And so maybe there's a specific answer for that if we could get that, but that's my second comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Next up with the hand raised, Mr. Mark Dissoni. Mr. Mark Dissoni, can you please unmute yourself and state your name and address?
Yes, Mark Dissoni, 49 Hawthorne Road, Ashland, Mass. Thank you for letting me speak. Back and forth, this is what this is. Looking at affordable to break it down to commercial to what the design the committee should get, shouldn't get, what the planning board is going back and forth. I'm wondering how much more can the developer take before we get frustrated because he's doing everything other than jumping backwards and doing hoops to understand what's going on. And before, the last time he was on, this was on, it was getting praised for the good changes and design and what it looked like. Now it seems like it's going back to affordable housing and less of an economical drive to come through. So why is this board going back and forth and wants all this data? Data's numbers if it works, but for the designer, the people inside the building doing the work, why is this going to be a trouble if it was good one time and not good at this time? And break it down commercial, it's breaking down an economical idea. So with the understanding, my question is, I got a question. My question is, can anybody do a compromise, go down a two-way street and compromise to where it was positive about a month ago? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stoney. Next up, Joan Confrade. Joan, can you please unmute yourself and introduce yourself to the board with your name and address?
Yes, Joan Confrade, One Shore Road. Thank you. I want to start by saying I do think that that what I'm seeing tonight is better than what we saw last week. I appreciate that. I do have a big concern about commercial. I know there was talk about how much it's come down, but it's actually come down from 100,000 square feet to 22,000 square feet. And Ashland is losing a lot of business in this development. And there's just too many apartments for downtown. When 195, 200, you know, it really doesn't make any difference. It's just too many. I don't know where the cars are going to go. I don't know where the kids are going to go. There's no playgrounds that I can see. I know there was just an issue in the state where some kids were hurt playing on tracks because they had no playground where they lived. They lived next to tracks, and this is very close to tracks. Kids are going to go play. They're going to go find somewhere to raise cane, and you know, they need to have a spot. I do like the area in the middle. Maybe there can be something incorporated in there for a playground area. The other thing is the restaurant area. I thought that 10, I didn't see that tonight. Way back, there was a nice rendering of 10 being kind of a restaurant area with a nice outdoor patio kind of thing. And now I'm seeing a very small commercial space with more, with the gym and the, I think it was the gym and the historical location, et cetera, which I appreciate the historical location, no question. Maybe that could be incorporated into one of the towers in the, you know, down on the bottom of one of the towers that's kind of unusable space. It might be more out front and more accessible to people than inside the back of a building. Those are my comments. I just think there's just too many apartments. Thank you so much. Hello?
Thank you, Joan.
Okay.
The next person with the hand raised is Miss Helen Nicole. Helen, can you please state your name and your address for the planning board?
Hi, yes, Helen Nicole, 4 Elliott Circle, Ashland. So I guess I really have a few things that I want to talk about. And one is, you know, aside from the loss of the historical buildings, which has been one of my big concerns, and other issues regarding affordability, access, location near the Sudbury River, you know, all of that is all of concern, the parking, the traffic. But the one thing I've maintained, I think, since we started talking about this becoming an actual development, was that if we had to do this, we have to lose this historic area or one of the buildings or two of the buildings, I wanted it to be something that I felt would fit into Ashland in a historic area and in a historic industrial area, in a way that it brought some kind of charm and character into the downtown area. So I want to say that I am happy with the improvements that they made. I do notice the window size. I don't think they increased it. I think what they did there was put some sort of a dark background. So it looks like the window area is larger, but it does soften up the look. I think that's okay. I think that, you know, it does look much more like that original rendering, and I am happy about that. I am concerned also about the loss of the commercial space, and I know Rich talks about the development of the residential units and how it's going to pay for the development itself. So I can understand that with the interest rates going up, but I am really, really wishing on some level that they could find a way to put in some more commercial space. And then I did also want to mention, because Steve Morgan brought it up, and because it's something that I had not even planned on talking about, but because I've been kind of dealing with it this week, that historic cemetery goes back to that water area. I don't think people realize it. If you go to the back of that cemetery, it looks like a wooded area that drops down to the Sudbury River. And what I found out this week is there's graves back there, and not all of them are marked. So that is going to be an issue, I believe, that should really need to be looked at, because there are a lot of, in fact, probably there's more unmarked graves in that area than there are marked ones. So that's very concerning. And that's basically all I wanted to talk about. But I did feel like we looked the designs that they came back with, and I did want to say that because, you know, I've had a lot of issues with this project, and I know they've tried to make people happy with the design. So I did want to compliment the design that they came back with compared to the one we saw last time. But I did want to mention the other issues. So thank you.
All right, I think that's the end of our hands up. Thank you, Helen. So I just wanted to, Peter, do you have that email I sent?
Yep.
I sent, I gave Peter some links that I had found to various buildings, and I don't know if you forwarded that to Scott.
Oh, I don't know if I had it all.
Okay, I know, and out to the board. And these were just things I started looking at when we were trying to, after last time, we were trying to find, maybe go to that, well, leave it there for now. When we were trying to find, when we were looking at that initial rendering, and we saw that the images last time, and we said, this just isn't it, this isn't the rendering. And so what I went looking for is images that I thought reflected the personality of those renderings, but in real life buildings, buildings that exist. And I actually stumbled upon, first of all, this hotel, which Anna had actually referred us to way back in August as a building that was along a waterfront, because we were looking at historical buildings along waterfronts, right? Which is kind of what we have if we consider the Sudbury River this little waterfront, right? Yes, that's right. That's right. Suspiciously, it's the Tesmaninsky.
Don't fall in love with it, though.
But this is actually a historic building, right? We are building buildings that are maybe made to look like historic buildings or reflect historic buildings. So then I started to look at other things. Maybe go to that first link. Nope, the first link there, the hotel in Newport. Yeah. So this is a hotel, newly built, from scratch, in Newport, Rhode Island. So it's not even very far away. It's 3 stories. I don't know how tall it is. But, and it's actually more of a complex if you kind of go in there, and we can send the link of, of various buildings and then spaces between. So it starts to get this other kind of language of the masonry. Here's one with a flat roof. They just don't deal with the little flat roof, the little barely angled roof on it. They put a flat roof on it and a historic cornice, right? There's that bottom part that's about the base for the building, right? All these kind of just architectural components. And then these little metal canopies, the little delicate, thing on it. And so those are the things that I'm trying to, those are the things that I keep trying to look for here. And yes, I think this week is closer to 2 weeks ago, or, when we met. But the detail, I don't think, it's still too harsh, right? Maybe go to another one of those. And Anna, you were pointing out a specific one. But this is just mine, right? This is just I'm also looking to see if I'm on the right page with other people, that these have that kind of a little softer feel. Obviously, it's a big masonry building, but somehow it feels a little softer. So this one actually is a reconstruction, or not a reconstruction, but a rehab. It was a hotel by I think it was this middle one that you clicked on.
Yeah, that was the.
Yeah, it is a historic building, but completely redone. So some of the same features there. Maybe it's the.
But I agree with you, Tricia, that I think what's really successful off the bat on these images is the fact that there is a heavier material base to the brick structure, industrial structure that goes over it. So the base gives it the human scale. And I think it's what's I think Kate or Kevin were saying. If some of that granite, for example, could make it into a base that's more recognizable, that is the human scale for shopping or for the commercial spaces, and then the brick goes on top. I think what we're seeing that's a little overwhelming is that the brick goes from top to bottom.
Right.
And I think it's different here.
So can we also show the image like this one? Can we go back? Can you scroll down a little bit?
The one with the next one.
Further down.
Yeah.
So that one really grabbed my attention because I got thinking about the towers, and I got thinking about, like, if you kind of imagine that being a sliver, like a tower, if you will, like that could be 3 towers next to each other, right? In other words, thinking about Kevin's point of what can we do with the materials that are already there, that are going to be brought down, and trying to take away from that denim thing that you were concerned about.
Legacy place.
Yeah, legacy. Thank you. Legacy place. Yes. But you could essentially take those towers and add this kind of combined element. And that grabbed my attention, maybe because of the crisscross on top, which is extremely similar to this tower design. But I for one, am comfortable with the more industrial feel. I think I respect that feel. I do think this is a little different. Like I lived in Portland, Maine for 10 years, and Portland has a lot of those, if you've ever been there, a lot of those brick buildings that have been kind of redone. This is different because we're actually bringing down buildings. So we can't really have a skeleton of that original brick. But we can do this. We can take some of that original material and add it to the industrial in a way that honors that history, truly honors it, right? You're gonna have a ton of material there. I don't know what you guys are doing with it, if you're selling it or how you're using it, but that, from my understanding of the history, is some of that stuff is local to the area, and it would be fun to see it.
Yep.
Yeah, and I did put this one in because of that cross bracing, because you had made a comment on one of the
But I really
ones.
liked it, yeah.
But this, to me, this does not feel like a parking garage. There's something delicate. There's something delicate about the metal that isn't showing up on the current renderings. There's a detail to it, a delicateness to it that kind of shows what steel can do.
And there's layers too, because
that's
you
right.
See, that's just the top layer is different than the middle and the base. So it's not just an extrusion. It's
Right. So there's something else going on. And this one had also the flat roof garden on top, which I don't know if it's a part of this project or not. But again, it's a flat roof.
That's nice.
They're okay. They're filled. Small town America is filled with flat roofed buildings if they're done right.
Yeah,
right?
the green roof thing on top is awesome.
So
I think we talked about that last time, I think.
Yeah.
But I think it's about just going and searching of these images and I looked for a lot of images that have that feel, and sometimes you don't quite know what it is until you really start looking at it closely, right, to see what the detail is. And then how do you beg, borrow, and steal and put them in your project, right? Good poets borrow and great poets steal, right? That's the... And this is, I think think that thought this was, I couldn't find the source of this one. I think it's somewhere in Colorado. I don't think it's, there's just different things I liked about different ones. Maybe this was kind of the scale.
Yeah, I mean, something,
But,
I mean, that would look really interesting in that kind of, I think Marcella described it as kind of that repeated industrial part of the building, right, to add some layers to it.
That's right, or even that not all the windows on this building are the same. It has some different windows, it has some different components. It's not just one element repeated. And I know a repeated element gets you to a cheaper per square foot cost, but we have to balance it out with character, you know, as well in this situation. So anyway, I just thought it would be a useful conversation to see what jumped out at other people, and not just myself, for the feel of what this building could be.
Sounds like we like it. We
Yeah,
like
I
those
actually
details.
I want to thank you for bringing this up, because I think that is the key, and I think Scott was agreeing. I mean, we're having a conversation of bringing texture and scale and a little more attention to detail, which is probably the next stages of the design process. But I think what I feel when the pictures that you brought up is that quick connection that you cannot describe that we felt when we saw the first rendering. And it goes down to texture and scale, and I think that this project has all the potential to do it.
And it's hard to model in such a large scale, so it really might be about modeling just a portion of one of these buildings, or trying out a couple portions and seeing how they feel, rather than trying to model the whole thing, which is, I know, extremely time consuming and doesn't zoom into place like it does on TV.
Yeah, no, again, we basically had to get to be modeling the whole thing in order to now get to, you know, the individual pieces, which was I was hoping to get to that, you know, kind of look at some individual elevation details, but time runs out.
Enemy of all time.
So, I have a question. How is design review different than what we just did? No, just kidding.
Well,
just kidding.
it's a big project. Design review would look at deeper issues that maybe we don't have time for.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, is that a real question for you? Because I think we've spent quite
to a certain extent, yes. It would be good to understand the process, because then I'm used to working in towns where you mentioned that you basically make a list of things to send to design review.
Well,
I've never heard of that before, but if that's the process, that's good to know.
Well, I guess what we have found, and not over 10 years, just recently, that sometimes we're trying to streamline our process so that things don't go to design review. Design review has a conversation, it comes back to planning board, and the planning board says, you know, that's not what we want, right? And so it wastes time. What we're trying to get to is something that the planning board, and please anyone interrupt me if I'm not describing this properly, something that the planning board can support in terms of scale, in terms of unit, all those kind of big picture items, but also I think in terms of feel for the project. And then I think when we feel that it's really on the right track, that framework is there, then we're kind of ready to set it on, because there's so many more details to go into, right? Because this is still, the things we talked about are still just the beginning, and let them get into all the details that we can't even go there. With the hope that when it comes here, we're all just like, yep, great, looks good.
And my next question is, are they just advisory to you?
By bylaw, the design review committee is an advisory committee to ours, right?
Okay.
So we feel that kind of process is important, so they're not wasting their time, so applicants aren't wasting their time, so we all work as efficiently as possible. So. All right, so on that note, if there's no other comments, I think we're looking to continue.
Can I make a couple suggestions as to what we need to do?
Sure.
I think I was going to bring it up, is we need some next steps.
Yeah,
please.
So I wrote down that we need to request a new updated traffic study. I think we need to actually send this to Concom for some preliminary analysis of where we are And I'm ready for a formal Concom process to begin, because I think it's going to be complex. So my personal recommendation is traffic study, go to Concom. I also think we need another meeting that's focused on floodplain, stormwater jurisdiction that's ours, including this historic cemetery piece that I had no clue about. And I think it'd be helpful to get Peter's memo on that. It seems to be related to the floodplain stormwater piece that's also ours. So it might be helpful to have Concom do their thing and us do the stormwater thing, so that that piece gets addressed as soon as possible, because I think those could be very expensive things to address. And I, for one, think they need to be addressed as quickly as possible. Traffic study, Concom, stormwater, and historic cemetery. Those are the three things that I would suggest we move forward as quickly as possible on. And then my request for the applicant would be, I, for one, would love more data on the economic feasibility of the commercial space and affordability, so that we can better be informed and understand, why are we going down in commercial? Why are we losing or how can we address affordability better? So I think Rich's comment that he just cannot make it work without certain things needs to be a little deeper. I would like that to be a little bit of a deeper conversation with Rich. It sounds like he's talking to some developers and there's some flexibility, and I think it's appropriate to have that conversation. And then there were some elements that I would like to explore more, such as the playground piece for the kids, the green roof concept, the location of that historic mill building, museum or whatever, being more centralized or more visible from the front. And then obviously all of the design elements that Tricia raised, that Marcelo raised, need to be revisited. So those would be the 4 things I would want from the applicant, or 5.
I have a comment with the traffic study. So I think the traffic study comes from the applicant, but I think the neighbor raised some concerns that if we just say, hey, repeat this and maybe update some data, I'm not sure that's what we want. So I think it might be on us or our independent consultants to say, what do we really need before we ask them to do that?
I can clarify a few things on the traffic study. The traffic study was done in 2020 and submitted, and it was reviewed by your consultant, Ron Mueller, and he had comments that he submitted to you and to us on September 8th, 2022. Cornerstone responded to those comments on November 1st of 2022, and the discussion is it really critical to have a new traffic study done? We're hearing that that's what you are suggesting or requesting, so we'll reply to that. But there's been activity on the traffic study and commentary and response to commentary.
Yeah, I think. Oh, go ahead, Kevin.
Was that traffic study based off this current alignment where the entrance is at the traffic light, or was that?
Well, the previous scheme had them offset.
Right.
So actually, we're in a better position now relative to traffic control probably than previous. But nevertheless, the overall occupancy of the buildings has remained about the same. But again, like they said, the data was from 2017 and 2020, I believe. So anyway, Ron had some good comments.
I, for one, would like to understand the difference in traffic between 188 units and 200.
There would probably be no difference, but.
That would be good if there is no difference. I mean, if Kevin is telling me there's no difference.
Actually, the study.
Okay.
Study was based on more units.
Yeah, I think the study was based on 222 units.
Understood.
I think the timing is interesting, though.
It
the
is.
2020, obviously, especially with all the things ending today, we're all reminded about 2020. So, and maybe that's a question for Ron Mueller too, to have that. It seems like a big thing, but.
I think it's been a while since I looked at the traffic stuff. Obviously, our focus has been on the design, the scale, the massing, the buildings per se. So I think it's time to just dust off the traffic report and I'll go back and take a look at it and to say, okay, as this moves forward, do we review a new traffic plan? Where do we leave off in the fall? and where should we go with this? And obviously, and say, okay, what are the numbers that we're moving forward with?
Well, the other thing is Pine Hill Road specifically.
Correct.
If it was not addressed, are there other streets that we also did not address? I wouldn't want to just like open it up for Pine Hill Road if there's other nearby streets that may have similar questions.
That's right. The question should be to kind of look and see if there's any other roads that maybe were overlooked in the first study.
Yeah, I think it's a question that we could probably ask to Ron Mueller before.
Yeah, I think
they go and do a whole new study, right?
Right,
Like,
right.
does this one still
Yeah.
apply? Have you seen the counts have changed drastically post-COVID? And we specifically heard a question about this one street because I know that sometimes you get far enough away that that's just the way they do their.
Well, it's really
their counts
interesting.
is that, like,
She made a comment about traffic downtown, right? There's more traffic downtown right now because of construction. It's a
Right,
really good
that too,
test
yeah.
of what happens when there's more people, right? So because there's construction, we have kind of a live test of what it would look like with a lot more stuff going on. And she's making a point, her street is being used as a turnoff to sort of escape things. That's a really fascinating experiment, right? And we wouldn't have that without the construction. Now we might have that with 200 apartments or 195. And are there other streets like Pine Hill that are getting people trying to escape traffic? I don't know. I don't live downtown.
But that's a good question maybe to ask Ron Mueller, because it may be not fair or technically correct to do a traffic study while that construction is still in place. You might want to see when it finishes and then do the traffic study. Let's see what he recommends.
But it might not be done
Kevin-
for like a long time.
we don't know that. Maybe not. But I mean, it's going to be done this year, right? But that portion, I mean, I think we have to ask the expert to give us his opinion on. Do we need an update? Do we need a?
So it sounds like we're just gonna write to him and ask him,
Yeah.
would it matter that it's not 2020 anymore? And would it matter that there's certain streets that are getting
Impacted.
Ask for his recommendation of how to proceed now that the project has settled into.
So who would do
something
that?
is-
Would that be something Peter would write?
I will write to Ron Mueller, yeah, I'm the direct
Okay.
contact to Ron.
Okay.
And if you need George's correspondence from November, I can send that again, but you should have it.
I think I probably have it.
Yeah, replying to Ron's comment.
Sure, no, I think, we probably had it. I think the question is where to leave off, November. You know, obviously, I think November was a pinch point when we really kind of came in on the project to say, you know, are we all in and what happened? And so obviously, over the holidays, things has changed and things have continued to change just regarding the building itself. So I think now the traffic was put on the back burner.
Are there any other points not mentioned by Anna that anyone wants to add on that list?
Does the Historic Commission weigh in on this project at all?
Yeah, we submitted to the Historic Commission to demolish, whatever you want to call it, 34 and 50 and 40 and 50. And we've submitted that on April 28th, 2022, which is actually over a year ago. So our demolition delay is over.
They've already made that stop.
So essentially that issue is all set.
But we're not going to start demo tomorrow.
So what about Concom and what is the board's thought on that?
Yeah, I think it's obviously a good idea to know what their process is when they think is the right time for them to see it.
So
if
have
they
we-
look at it and
yeah.
say, no, you guys got to figure
Did
a
we
few
already
things out first.
ask that specific question of when you guys want to see it?
I can.
Because I
I
personally
think
think it's time
Comcom,
for
I
them
think
to see it.
typically with big projects, you know, they run simultaneously with Comcom and
Yeah.
planning. So I would have no issues pushing this towards Comcom to make sure that it starts moving down that road of
Yeah,
their
I
review.
think it's time. So do we initiate that or does the applicant?
The
How does that-
applicant will initiate that, most
Okay.
likely, and obviously I've been cued in with our conservation agent, you know, just to give her updates on where things are going. And obviously, we've made some pretty big strides over the last month, you know, and so, you know, and really after tonight, if we're saying let's move ahead with everything, then I think that's a fairly big stride to make, which I think is appropriate.
I think it's time.
I think it's appropriate and it's time, you know, I will say that. and I think we can do that. But no, they do have to file with COMCOM. There are stormwater. There's things that have that, you know, it's within the riverfront jurisdiction. You know,
So
there's
some of that is
numerous
ours too,
things.
right? Some of that jurisdiction is mutual, essentially.
No.
Or
No.
or
The
floodplain.
The floodplain is, yes,
Is ours.
jurisdictional by us,
Yep.
yes, because they're buildings within the floodplain.
Yep.
The stormwater permit
Is
goes through them, right? We typically share the same review from a civil standpoint.
Yep.
But then any work within a riverfront and a buffer zone, that's all jurisdiction under the Conservation Commission.
I mean, I for one think it's time for it to go to them for stormwater and for us to start talking about floodplain.
Yeah, obviously we will.
Yeah.
So, but we want their opinion on that too. You
Yeah.
know, we're not going to force something under their lap that
Yeah, yeah.
they're not ready for. So, okay, so unless anyone has anything different to add to the list, we'll compile that, get going on all those different factors. But where does that put us as far as a date to come back here? Knowing that we have to meet with select board on one of those meetings. I don't remember, we don't even know quite when that is yet.
We don't know when that quite is. Next meeting on the 25th, we have two new public hearings.
What are they? Are they?
One's a one's a modification to an existing site plan that was passed
Okay.
about 5 years ago, before I arrived. I think it dates back to about 2000.
And the other?
And then the other one is a definitive subdivision for the land area that is owned by 58 Exchange, which is the Fafra company that surrounds the public safety building. This is the follow-up
Okay.
from the preliminary subdivision, the preliminary zoning freeze subdivision that was put forth back in November. So this is the definitive subdivision. So by regulations, they have to file that within 7 months of the original date of the preliminary. So they're doing that. And so that is just that kind of falls into line with the zoning freeze.
So where are you looking, Scott? Are you looking at, I mean, it's possible that we could do an hour in 2 weeks, right? 30, you know, on our schedule. Wait, is 9 to 49? Where did we put? They were June 8th.
They're in June 8th.
Yeah. So.
So June 8th is not possible, you're saying?
No, June 8th is possible.
It's possible, because nothing else is on it. Well, we don't know when, we don't know when select board is coming back.
It would be good to know, what is your expectation? You heard all the comments
Yeah.
that we said today. You have some work to do. What is your assessment of how much time you need?
Again, June 8th would be preferred, so that we can dive into all of the things that we've been talking about, as well as follow up on, you know, conservation and other items. Is that?
Well, don't we just put 9 to 49 on June 8th? And don't we potentially have comprehensive plan, the 2-hour meeting on June 8th, potentially, right?
We want to do that.
No, I don't either.
Like, let's
That's too many
learn,
hours.
And we're trying to be better. So.
Yeah, so I think we can either do, you know, you don't have to address all of those things in 2 weeks. You know, maybe you're just looking at some of the things, you know, that you're just looking at design, or you're just wanting to move forward with.
Or can it go to the next one in June?
It can, if you want more, if more time would be good, we can put you on the second meeting in June. But I'm very hesitant on that June 8th meeting, when we already talked about that potentially filling up.
It depends if we break it down. Like, let's say that they're coming back just to talk about the economic feasibility and the affordable versus commercial, one topic. If it's one topic, it's feasible to do it June 8th. And we save the other stuff, the design elements, playground, all of that stuff for another time. And that buys us time also to get this to Concom, maybe, or to start the Concom process, so that, in theory, the next big meeting might be floodplain and Concom. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And design, which gives you some time for design. I feel like the big new thing, and obviously design is really important, but the big new thing to me is the down and the commercial and the up of the units.
All right, so why don't we do this? Why don't we put it on for June 8th? Because something is likely to, 9 to 49 may not be done with design review committee. the comprehensive plan may not be on June 8th, but we will not tell you how much time we have for you.
Yeah.
And so if we end up having, hey, we got 30 minutes for you.
No, I think that
Well-
it's a good idea to focus on the financial aspects and the fact that actually we're providing more commercial space than we have now at the building. The majority
So
of
let's
space
talk
at the
about that.
building is warehouse and carpentry shops, mattress storage, automotive repair, churches. And that's not really retail, commercial, day-to-day use. So we can very easily do a
So I think we need to come
comparison.
back and actually talk about that.
Sure.
And
So
talk
why don't-
about,
Yeah, so why don't we do that on June, we'll put you on for June 8th, but like I said, we won't guarantee how much time.
Sure.
Once we know more about that, Peter can be in touch and say, do you still want your June 8th, or do you want more time on the next meeting or something like that? If that's,
And I should know at some point next week,
we probably should know sooner rather than later on that.
very much
Okay.
so.
Does that sound okay, Rich? Are you still there?
Okay, so I will make a motion to. Oh, is that Rich? Did he?
Yep, you said
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, I was muted, sorry. Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
I will make a
June 8th,
motion.
Even if we got a little bit of time, we can talk more about the economic end and like Scott was just saying, so we can break that down.
Okay.
can I ask Rich one question about the Concom stuff?
If it's
Sure.
a yes/no question.
Yeah, I mean, my concern is, like, I'm trying to understand that, speaking of financial viability, without the Concom piece being kind of really set in stone and finished, it's hard for me to understand the financial viability of this project, truly. So, what are your thoughts on
Well,
that,
they-
Rich?
They don't really correlate.
Okay, that's all I need to hear, that
conservation-
in your mind, it doesn't correlate.
The conservation is clearly an issue that needs to be discussed and clarified, and floodplain and all of that. There's comments about a cemetery that I don't own. It's not on my property. There's things that can all be addressed with that. That is not an economic decision.
Okay,
a
so you don't
factor.
need-
All right, so
you
we're
don't
gonna,
need
wait,
that done.
we're going to discuss this at another time, because we are getting late here, okay? So I am making a motion that we are continuing 10 to 16 Main Street special permit and site plan review to June 8th. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And a roll call vote.
Deepa Venkatai.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcel Barjona, aye.
Catherine Jersey.
And Tricia Kendall, aye. So thank you. 10 to 60 Main Street team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda, and if you saw me, is a conversation with the CPC. If you saw me texting, it was to Aaron Ladd, who is out there somewhere. I was suggesting to Aaron Ladd, there he is. I was suggesting that if he doesn't mind, it would be best to postpone that discussion to another date. Obviously, that works for him, where we would have a more awake board than starting a conversation at 10:20. Aaron, is that good for you? I didn't really get a clear answer from you.
Sorry, I've been watching the Celtics game and hanging out at home and doing multitasking. So I hope you didn't mind
Can
that.
you just mute him, Peter? Please, no.
I can do whatever you guys want to do.
I just think, I just think we would be able to have a more extensive conversation if we put you on another time. I guess we didn't keep you up, from going to sleep or anything.
That's fine. I have a 6-month-old and a 4-year-old, so if they start screaming, that'll be my wake-up call. I get my meetings done much earlier than this. I guess one thing I would just be, we could continue another meeting. One thing I would just be helpful to come back with is just like, what are questions people have about CPC, or what do they want to know?
Okay.
And I can kind of do that as my homework, and that way I come into a next meeting a little more prepared. I can give an outline. So maybe just a quick 2 minutes from each person of like, what do you want to know? And that might just help the discussion.
Yeah, that is, that is very fair. So we will get that to you. And
Do you want it to know now about that? Are you asking for us to tell you that today?
we can send
Okay.
questions to Peter and then
Okay.
get those to him in writing. All right. So thanks, Aaron. We will bother you. I do appreciate you coming on.
I listen to the projects too, so I'm just curious to listen to those as well.
Okay, and we will find, like I said, find a date that works for you, and then we'll do it at that time. Thank you. All right. We have a couple meeting minutes, but before we do, if there's anything on the reports, I have one thing which I'll do now, and then anyone else can jump in. Sustainability Committee. There was for anyone who didn't check on town meeting or who wasn't there, there was a warrant by the Sustainability Committee to approve the opt-in specialized code, which is an extension of the stretch code, which just went into, well, part of it went into effect in January, the other part goes into effect in July. It did not pass at town meeting, and I offered to the Sustainability Committee, I had problems with it, approving it at this time, and I offered to the Sustainability Committee that I would fill in as the member, as to be present at their meetings, to kind of talk through the issues, including properly vetting that warrant. Obviously, we did not discuss that warrant with them. But I know, Anna, you had been in kind of that liaison position. Marcelo had offered to do it one time. I know both of your schedules are less flexible than mine. And so it's more like being able to discuss this as a group, that I'm willing to step into that position if I guess if the group as a whole is comfortable with me doing
I
that.
was not at town meeting. I got some commentary from residents as to what occurred. I think in light of your experience as an architect, your position at town meeting, I think it would make sense for you to work closely with them and being chair of the planning board. So I think we're more likely to succeed at a future town meeting if that happens, overall, altogether. So I, for one, have no issue with you working directly with them on this.
I support what Anna's saying, and I guess the only commentary I would offer is that there is the possibility that success is not opting for that. So we have to keep an open mind, because there's a lot of implications of what some towns are trying to do, and we don't know the repercussions. We all want affordable housing. I mean, today was an example of it. These new codes are going to make it much more difficult to build affordable housing, because they're getting very stringent. And if we go even a step further, it may complicate that process in the town. So it's something that needs to be discussed. So I think we should go into it thinking, my viewpoint, that success is not just passing this point. Success is discussing and understanding whether we want it or not.
I agree. I would never look to speak for the board that this is something we all want without understanding it and without vetting it to the board as a whole. I simply offered to be the liaison to that group. And Deepa, if you're interested, or if anyone else is interested, it doesn't have to be me, but I wanted to offer them a person to be there. So
I think if they're thinking about another town meeting submission in the future, I think it would be really, really important for you to work with them, bring back to us where they are. We can always offer insight as to where we are. I do think that makes sense right now, in light of what occurred at town meeting, that happened.
Okay.
So
all good? I'll fill in?
Yes.
All right.
did they have some objection to that?
What?
Did they have some concerns or objections
about
to
me?
that? Or about it not being Marcelo or myself?
Oh, no, not at
Okay.
all. I had already talked to you guys about it. I didn't want
Really happy about it.
You're smiling a little bit, yeah.
I do have a quick comment on the comprehensive plan. So I think it was a few meetings back, and I recall because it was in the minutes, that Anna and I had asked the Brandy and Yolanda, as select board members of the project management group, to bring back the document that the planning board had voted on, because we found out that it wasn't voted, and they said they would bring it back to the select board to vote. And we found out, I don't know what meeting, but it was again discussed but not voted. And I mean, sort of jokingly, I don't know if they voted not to vote on it or whatever, but it was presented that they rediscussed it. And I just wanted to clarify, I said I need to bring that to the board, because our records show they were asked, they stated they would have a vote, and that didn't happen. So I don't think it's a big deal. I think the record's important to be correct, that's all.
Are you saying we need to correct some of our meeting minutes? Or do
No,
we need to?
no,
Okay.
but it's.
You're just noting that they actually did, that for our knowledge, that they
Yeah.
did not actually vote on it.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. I know we discussed it, obviously, at that meeting. I don't remember. I don't remember what the final result was. So, okay, thank you. Anything else on that list, 6 and 7, from anybody?
Nope.
Otherwise, we will.
I do on 6. I want to make sure that MBTA Communities doesn't fall off, because I remember last time we asked, Peter said after town meeting, he could get us something, so I just want to make sure that's on the radar screen.
Yeah, so I can just state that Alvaro and myself are putting together a pretty big presentation, PowerPoint presentation that would be a gift to the board, and to the select board at the present time. So we're working on it as it moves forward. But we're staying in tune, we're staying in touch, we're staying in tune, and they're putting together a presentation for you.
Can we get that scheduled? Like, I know it's just very critical, and I'm afraid that if we're not engaged about that, it's.
Yeah, I know Peter and I were just talking about that. That's obviously on the list in the next couple months of things that we have to stay on top of. So, we can probably do it at the next meeting, right? Because we don't have either 9 to 49 or 10 to, we have two smaller things. I mean.
We have two smaller things that shouldn't be too long. You know, I think depending on where that master plan interviews fall, we can go from there. You know, I think that's the X factor that has to fall in our calendar, and then we can kind of go from there. And then I think it's appropriate to start the discussion on MBTA communities, and obviously it's in the newspaper. Everyone's thinking about it.
So why don't we put MBTA communities on there for our next meeting? And if we have to take it off because the consultant interviews need to happen, we'll take it off. But at least it's on as a placeholder. Anything else on that list? Okay. Then I don't remember if I put it on last time or if it just got put on, but at some point, Marcella had mentioned meeting with the Historical Commission. It was probably months ago.
Yeah, was one of the, I mean, we're meeting with different commissions to understand, you know, our connection with them.
Yeah.
We had one or at least one conversation with them after their warrant that they tried to pass failed. And there was a discussion about where does the survey, the historical survey of Ashland stand. It would be good to understand it. We're dealing with projects that have historical implications.
Yeah.
And open the door to a stronger relationship with them, I think would benefit everybody.
Yeah, I think so too. That was about, when we talked to them before, it was about that specific warrant.
Yeah.
Instead of having a more general conversation.
Yeah.
So we'll just look for an opening, you know, for that. Okay. Sorry to cut you off here.
No.
I'm getting tired. Grumpy.
Me too.
All right, so we have some more meeting minutes here. The first one is March 23rd. This was the one where I joined the meeting late, I believe. And then, yeah, at 8:30, then we went into executive session.
So you guys, the only thing that throws me off about this is our agenda for tonight says minutes review is March 9th. The email that we got on May 5th referenced the drafted minutes from March 9th. If you open up the March 9th email.
March 23rd.
If you open up March 9th, it's the exact same minutes as what we're looking at now. But the dates have changed to March 23rd. So what I'm trying to tell you is our agenda for tonight indicates we're reviewing March 9th. March 9th was emailed to us, but it's the exact same document as March 23rd with a different date. I think we need to regroup, fix the agenda, and make sure we have the right minutes.
Can you explain this, Peter?
Good eye.
Sorry.
That one's on me.
I'm
100%.
the lawyer. I can't help myself.
Yeah, that's, okay.
Yeah.
They both came through. Let me double back and see what happened.
I just don't know if we're looking at March 9th or 23rd,
No,
but either way, the agenda has to say the right thing.
Yeah, and in any case, we can put up the draft minutes
The
online.
draft minutes,
We'll put up
yeah.
the draft minutes online, so it'll be in compliance with that.
Yes, but make sure you put the right date, because these are,
Yeah,
we
I
don't know
I-
what this is.
So I will
Yeah.
say I've been working to clean up the minutes, and so I do have draft executive session minutes from March 9th. I do have draft minutes that go back to November 7th, which was our meeting with 10 to 60
In-person.
Main Street, the in-person when we rolled out the trace. And I
Yep.
think that's really when the conversation really switched to building design rather than everything else that was going on with that one. But I was trying to clean up the meeting minutes, so maybe there's been too many meeting minutes floating around in my meeting minutes folder. So let me go back. I'll straighten it out, and then
Yeah.
I'll put it on the next agenda.
And
Yeah, so let's just put them up as draft minutes online, and then we'll.
I can put them up as drafts, so we're compliant.
Yeah, and we'll look at
And
it.
then
with
we'll go
improvements.
back, and then we'll take care of
But
it.
just make sure they're really for the 9th, is what I'm
Yeah,
telling
no,
you.
no,
Or
I'll
the
double check.
23rd, yeah.
That's something I can do. I apologize.
No, it's all good. So I think that covers everything for today.
There's always something else. Does anyone
Unless
have
we-
anything?
I'm
else?
gonna, since we got off that, so
Yeah.
can we, it's under other, I think, can we talk about adding a public comment at the beginning of the meeting? I think we might have loosely talked about that when there was a new agenda, but I don't.
Yeah, I mean, that basically when we started coming here, and I don't want to have a long discussion about it tonight because it's already late.
Yeah,
But
that's
there
why I
was-
want to just kind of get it out
Yeah,
there.
so maybe we can add that to our next agenda about how we, if and how we want to do that. But the last time when we made this switch, I decided that we had enough changes we were dealing with getting back into the room, and we would leave that one for another
Yep.
date. So I did talk to town council about it to understand if we open it up, how open does it get, you know? In terms of time, I don't anticipate that really being a problem, but, you know, but it is something to consider. So, okay, so we will add that at least, because we will add that to a discussion topic, even if it's short-term
Yep.
for our next
Thank you.
meeting.
Will we get a kind of a format for the consultant interviews? And would we get the copy of the package?
We can send out the we can send out the RFP. Well, I think once a date is, well, we can send out the RFPs as soon as possible.
I know
for
that-
everyone to
Is
take a look
there a
at.
process of, format of how that
Yeah.
evening pans out?
The project management team does not have a process yet. We discussed having, I think we brainstormed the idea of having another meeting for the project management team in order to come up with a format where we would come up with some standard questions that one person, like Michael, would ask each applicant questions, but then we would open it up to the general boards. So there is no current process yet, but the project management team is trying
But
to
we did
figure it
have
out.
loosely that we were asking them to do a short presentation and limiting it to like 20 minutes. And maybe, I think we decided we weren't going to guide them because that would be part of how we're judging them in a way.
Are we good? Do we need to make a motion to?
Just one more question. Because it has to do with the binders.
I'm leaving mine.
Well, I mean, I think traditionally, for lack of,
Yeah.
they get emptied out, but I'm almost thinking it would be better to keep a tab for 9049 Main and anything,
Totally agree.
so that the materials are there and new materials added on top. Can we
Yeah.
do that? Like, let's not throw things away. I mean, you're always free to rip something out of your own binder, but otherwise, you lose all the information from the meeting before.
No, I'm happy to, you can number one, feel free, bring them home and look at the material that you want. Obviously, I don't want to print out renderings time and time again. Obviously, they're probably going to change for the next meeting, so I'm going to have to print out new ones. So obviously, feel free to take those home, look at them, do what you want to do with them. Because I recycle the paper, but it is a lot of obviously ink and waste. But I can keep everything in the binder and reorganize it, and then the next meeting I can put the new material and try to
Whatever works
organize
for
it.
you.
Yeah.
I'm concerned they're gonna get small eventually if we keep doing it, so.
Well, I think once a project's over,
Yeah.
you would just clear it
Yeah.
out
Gotcha.
and talk and,
Yep.
and clear that topic out.
Yep.
But, you know, for the next meeting, obviously, we're not gonna have, you know, that 9 to 49 will stay, but I'll just have to stagger. I'll just organize it, and obviously, we'll just lead each other through.
You and I can talk about how to organize.
Yeah,
them.
that's minutia for 10:40.
Was there something?
Yeah, the other thing is that everyone found their bio in here. We're not going to deal with it tonight. You can take it home, or you can wait and do it before the next planning board meeting. They just need to be updated. Some people have dates in
do.
them that don't make sense.
Yes, I just found that out. Yeah.
So, but you don't need to do it right now. You can take it with you or do it next time.
Yeah.
It will stay in the binders. if
How
you
do we
leave
need
it.
to make a motion?
Oh, yeah,
I'll
let's
make a
motion.
motion to
Adjourn.
adjourn at, what time is it?
10-some.
10:37.
10:37 PM.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Deepa Venkatai.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Hana, aye.
Catherine Jersey guy.
And Tricia Kendall, aye. All right. Good night, everybody.